And we're live. Hi, everybody. Hope you're well. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me again. So I see everybody's having fun in the chat. Welcome, chat. Welcome, viewers after the fact. So tonight I'm going to talk about this Tom McDonald controversy in Ireland. So for those who don't know, he's a recently elected politician on a nationalist ticket, anti-immigration, stuff like that. And since he's been elected, he's been doing the rounds in the media. He's created quite a few controversial sound bites, or one or two anyway, which I think is good. Regardless, he's sort of generating buzz and conversation. Now, this was a candidate that hasn't been a major activist. He's just been active in his local area, we'll say. So come out of nowhere, and he's already generating controversy and generating conversation, which is important. He claimed, what was the line? Something about Irish women breeding. I'll get into it. I just can't remember the exact line. The media are quoting him that he promoted the fact that Irish women need to breed, B-R-E-E-D, reproduce, have children. And that's triggered people into nightmares about The Handmaid's Tale and the rest of it, that kind of stuff. Effectively, he was talking about reproduction and sustaining a country or population. So I want to get into all that because it touches on demographics. The question I'm sort of obsessed with for the last few months, which is the demographics thing. And everybody's talking about demographics, but I think there's more to be done on it. More to be said about the demographic question. For those who might be interested in this, but I believe the demographic question is a national question for every nation, sort of, and the idea of nations competing for the world's remaining immigrants and high growth populations. That's the way standard economists look at it. But eventually, you'll have negative birth rates, fertility rates globally. So the reason it interests me is because it's a national question, like a political nationalist question. But it's also a question of world history. If you were to look over the course of thousands of years, the idea that humans would stop replacing themselves for whatever reason would be a more than a millennia or millennium sort of piece level of historical significance. I mean, if you were to take 10,000 years of history, that would stand out from along with maybe a few other things. It would stand out as one of the major, along with maybe the discovery of fossil fuels, the printing press, stuff like that. This would be well up there, if not more, a greater thing than those. So when a councillor talks about it and the media react in astonishment and outrage, I find it quite interesting, and I like to analyze why the media and the regime sort of culture act so coy about it and so befuddled when they hear someone talk about the need to reproduce a national population, as if it's some sort of controversial thing, when it's actually probably the most obvious and uncontroversial thing you could ever possibly say. So I'll get into it and listen to some of these videos. They're quite funny, actually, and he's a really funny character. And then I want to talk a little bit about Clonmel, where English and other foreign sort of contract security workers have been brought in to guard and protect and occupy this migrant plantation center, migrant plantation barracks, whatever you want to call it. And it's quite something. I mean, I don't have all the videos. We'll watch a couple of them, but I just want to say a little bit. Most of it's been said by he's at New Ada, NEWADDA on Twitter. He did some up videos of what's gone down there, and he said it better than I can, but I'll add my tuppence anyway and watch a few videos. So it's crazy what's happening. It's actually, and it's a new level because, well, it's sort of new since Newtown Mount Kennedy, but it's sort of what's the word, copper fastened, concreted, or solidified the idea of mercenary foreign security occupying these centers during their building and everything, and I suppose afterwards as well, which is obviously has connotations to the black and tans of the past in Ireland, and it's not an exaggeration at all. So it's crazy. So we'll get into that. Yeah, there's loads of stuff to do with their security licenses and who they are. And just like, again, as I tend to do, like notes from an occupied nation type of story, just sort of a lot of it is stating the obvious. You're just looking at sometimes sometimes outrageous things. It needs to be just said, zoom out, a couple of miles into the air historically and geographically, and be able to just look at it from that sort of neutral enough objective point of view, and react in that appropriate way. So that's what I like to do. So that's what we'll do. So let's get into Tom McDonald. This was funny. I really enjoyed this the last few days. So I'll put it up kind of large. So I'll start with this, right? The media have been handed, like, I suppose he's just taken all the calls from the media sort of openly. When they call him up to do something, he just does it. Maybe he's got a fast and loose approach with it. Whereas I know a lot of people, certainly I am, and lots of people are reluctant to talk to media, I would almost just never talk to them. I wouldn't even send an email back. I just kind of don't. It's like, look, this is all a big setup. I'm not interested. I have my own platform to talk. So I don't know. You can watch me there. But I suppose he's a politician, so it makes sense for him to never turn away a microphone or a camera. And he's been all over the radio. But this kind of goes to show actually how important it is to have elected officials in, even if they were just councillors. He's a councillor in Newbridge, County Kildare. It goes to show how important that is, because of course, when a councillor makes a controversial comment, the media will, or like he's put his foot in it with one word, or they think one word was a bit naff. In this case, he said the word breed instead of reproduce, or he used an unfortunate word, but they all pounced excitedly on that, and so they're all clamoring to invite him onto their shows, during which he sort of stated his broader case, and so that's a big thing. And if he raises his profile, because a lot of people listening will like it, and it's just something you could never do. If he had made that comment on his Facebook 6 months ago, he would just be some random guy who has sort of non-politically correct beliefs, no big deal. He would just be ignored. But now that he's a councillor, it matters somehow. I know it's kind of strange why it's strange how it works, but that is how it works. He's now Councillor Tom McDonald, so it matters more what he says or something. I suppose the reason it matters is because it's recognized that a certain amount of people voted for him, and that gives him the legitimacy. Votes matter more than likes, type of thing, so likes and reshares and the rest of it. So he's been all over it. And the same, I'm excited to see how it goes forward. Gavin Pepper has been like putting in official complaints that Irish people are being replaced, and there's all sorts of stuff happening. But of course, Gavin Pepper, Malachy, all these people are really good media operators as well, clearly on social media, but they often engage with news channels and stuff. So of course, Patrick Quinlan, and so on and so on. So this is one of the biggest reasons really why it matters, because they can't get all that much done in the power machinery within the country, pulling the levers of actual power. But what they can do is have that legitimacy and have that media spotlight and start conversations and generate them. So here's one example where, and of course the media then are totally ill-equipped to deal with it. Irish media are totally soft. And here's one example where they tried to call him far right for having a Irish flag, which is like, talk about making yourself look like an idiot and supporting the candidate.
There were photographs, Tom, of you after you got elected yesterday evening holding up the Irish tricolour, and that has kind of been targeted as being described as far right with the nationalists around the country. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm delighted you brought that one up. I'm so proud to be Irish, and I'll die with the tricolour off, and I'll have it over my coffin. I'm an Irish man. I'm an Irish person. How would you be ashamed of having an Irish flag? That's media spin, that's what people are being ashamed to be Irish, being patriotic. We're patriotic. In 1916, all the men gave their lives to get the Brits out of this country and to stop that.
Talk about teeing it up for the guy. What a stupid thing. Now, there's also something to be said for it, that the so-called far right have, in a sense, like the media are right, that they have co-opted this flag. This tricolour Irish flag. It is the national flag of Ireland. And yet more and more, because that flag is often being hoisted down or sort of demoted compared to the so-called pride flag or the EU flag or the NATO flag or the Ukraine flag, it's like it's become sort of arbitrary now, the Irish flag. And at the same time, then nationalists have flown it with gusto all over the place at protests. So it has actually kind of been co-opted, but it's still the national official flag. And it's the flag everyone in Ireland grew up with. It's our flag, you know, and yet they've sort of almost ceded it to the so-called far right, which is funny. But, you know, he goes on to say nobody else flew it. Tom McDonald is actually good here. He's like, what do you want me to do? Fly a Palestinian flag? And the presenter says something like, nobody else flew it. You're notable for being the only one, which is bizarre. So no other politician who got elected, MEP, councillor, thought, oh yeah, I'm from Ireland. I'm in Ireland. The voters are Irish for the most part. Let me fly my national flag. I'm going off to be an MEP in Europe. Yeah, hey, I'm going to represent Ireland. You know, nobody thought to do that.
Satanic British rule over our country. You know what they've done to Ireland. They starved us and they put us to the four corners of the planet. And we got that flag. That was our symbol of who we are. We're Irish people, and we'll always have it. You know, that's who I'm an Irishman.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go with Palestinian flag or something, or what do you want me to go with?
No, I'm only asking the question. No other councillor had the Irish flag, and I was just wondering because obviously we've seen protests up and down the country with the people going around with the Irish tricolour, and the fact that you brought it into the council.
And fair play to everyone that has an Irish flag. And I was in New York about 6 years ago, and outside every house in New York, every second house, you see an American flag.
Yeah, you get the idea. But it says KFM. I assume that's Kildare radio. But you'd almost think, are they trying to throw him a softball there to get him more votes next time or what? Because that's just mad. So anyway, into the substance about the demographics. So it was this woman, don't really care what her name is, the interviewer for News Talk. Really doesn't matter at all. What matters is Tom. He was on News Talk, and she sort of interrogated him on this whole question of breeding or reproduction and promoting babies being born. And she keeps doing, you'll hear it now in a sec, but she keeps doing this kind of thing of like, you know, instead of just having a conversation with him, being interrogative, but also discursive, you know, a mix of both here and there where appropriate, you know, like a reasonable conversation she might have with anyone else. It's just all, do you not think that might sound a bit this? And a lot of people would say, you know, it's all like that. And it's just kind of like, what are you bleating about? Like, he's just saying Irish women are sub-replacement fertility. That's kind of a bad thing. We're bringing in loads of foreigners. Maybe we should promote Irish women to have babies, not going around making them or anything, like no sort of fantasy stuff like that from Handmaid's Tale, but just basically there's a huge chunk of Irish women who want to have a kid or want to have another kid and they can't because of financial pressures and work pressures and stuff. Maybe we could help with that. And then as a result, we would have more babies and it would be good for the country. She's like aghast and blown away and acting confused. I'll skip through this.
After lengthy counts, the last council seat.
I already have to skip on, sorry.
In the council. Yeah.
We'll go on. Do you know what?
What did I mean?
I actually have I'm going to skip it because it's 10 minutes long. We're not going to watch all of it, but I do have a timestamp. 7 minutes 30. It's where this is. You get the idea. I've already described what he basically says, right? That's what he says. That I described how she sort of tries to interrogate him and the rest of it. But I will give you like a quarter of the video to listen to. It's the funny bit where after all of that is said, she says like, she drops that like, oh, I'm actually 39, childless and unmarried. And he basically starts laughing at her. But he's really nice about it. He's like, oh, good for you, good for you. But the subtext is so clear between them, even though he's nice to her, you know, and he starts congratulating her for being able to go to nightclubs in Dublin and stuff. It's so funny. But you can tell she's sort of rattled by that. And I will get on more to this. I'm going to look at, just for those who are here now to stick around, there's some like popular women's podcast in Ireland, like mainstream liberal kind of thing. And I've noticed that they're starting to talk about this too from a liberal perspective. It's very interesting. I should have mentioned this at the start. It's very interesting. The likes of Keelan Moncrief, Louise McSherry, Melanie Murphy, these kind of influencer people. It's funny because they're having their own sort of mothering and female discourse about how it is in this society. And there are parts where it very much aligns to what I would say, maybe even what Tom McDonald says, which is a funny marriage, so to speak. I'm going to get onto that. That's where I want to get onto the meat of it I just want to start by giving you what Tom McDonald was saying. Yeah, I should have introduced this video better. Basically, I think there's a whole conversation to be had across the political spectrum among everyone that should sort of, from what you would call the far right or the politically incorrect, there's actually ample opportunity to take aim straight at the heart of mainstream, especially a millennial, Gen Z and below discourse with this stuff. And it's in a discombobulating way where you're sort of taking some of the wisdom from the past, clearly, that we've lost, but also not just wanting to go back, but actually go forward. It's like a future oriented, it's a version of, it's almost like a form of traditionalist technocracy, future oriented type of thing. That, again, it's not trying to just be regressive. It's like, no, we've actually discovered afresh that this is the best way to organize human society, and we'll do it differently to what De Valera did or whatever, because the future is different from the past. We have a different world, but we'd effectively achieved the same end. And there's a strong argument to be made from the, call it the right or the far right or politically incorrect, that made right, the mainstream right on liberal left would find hard to disagree with. So I want to get onto all that, but you see it creeping out here when this woman admits that she's 39 with no kids, not married, and he's like, he hits her with the nice fatherly attitude of like, good for you. But obviously you could tell he actually is sniggering while he's saying it. It's kind of funny. He's kind of giggling under his
They
breath.
do want to stay at home and make butter and bake bread.
My niece is an accountant, and she has a mortgage, a £400,000 mortgage. And I asked her, she says she runs her car. She couldn't afford to have a child. I couldn't afford Tom to have a child. You know, I get no incentive from the government whatsoever. You know, absolutely no incentive at all.
I'm sorry to cut across again. Again, the majority of women, I've had viral posts that touch off this stuff, and like they go, like ordinary women are like, yes, I'm really tired with life. I've been sold a bill of goods here. I do have to get up, go to work, come home, take care of kids, all these responsibilities. I feel like I get no help. I feel like I'm drowning. And there's no real good lefty solution to it, to be honest, actually. No lefty side of the fence is even trying to offer it, because they can't go at identity, they can't go at human fundamentals, they can't do any of that, so they don't know how to do it. And also they're run by corporations, like the sort of mainstream left is sort of just corporate now. So when he says stuff like this, there's going to be a lot of women who think, well, I'm not far right, I don't want women to be bred like they did in Handmaid's Tale. But when he talks about his niece and he talks about these things, common sense things, I can't help but think, I can't disagree with him, you know. So that's why I'm all for this stuff, trying to look into mainstream society. There are so many ills within mainstream society. You don't actually have to come at people all the time with plantation this and that, you know, replacement, IQ, blah blah blah, like, you know, the whatever it is. It doesn't always, you can actually go right to the daily reality of people's lives and sort of try to spell it out via that avenue, and that's exactly what Tom, I think, is instinctually doing, because he's just a straightforward kind of fella.
Between childcare and paying mortgage, how could I afford to have a child, Tom?
Do you think that this is something that, like, you know, like, I'm sure you're well versed and know well what the capacities and capabilities of what county councillors can do. This isn't something you're going to be able to bring in.
The election last night is only a stepping stone to the Dáil.
Do you intend to run for Dáil?
Oh yes.
So you will contest the next general election?
Of course I do, yes. Of course I do.
And will this be part of the manifesto?
Obviously. I'll have loads of manifestos that will incentivise the great women of...
Just side note, I love the idea of saying I'll have loads of manifestos. You can imagine going down to the pub, you get a pint and you start talking to someone at the bar or whatever, and you tell them you have loads of manifestos. It might sound a bit different to what he said, but it's just kind of funny. Yeah, loads of manifestos, lads.
Of Ireland, yeah, because it's you don't realise how important the woman is, you know.
Oh, sure, I know well. Yeah. But I don't know what you do with me, Tom. I'm 39 and I don't have children.
You don't have?
No.
Yeah.
This is it.
Oh, no. Well,
I'll probably be put down.
That's your That's your personal choice.
It
You've no
is,
children at
exactly.
39.
And tax incentive or no tax incentive, that'll not change my mind, Tom.
Yeah, well, that's a personal choice. Yeah, you probably like to go out to the nightclubs and whatever, like the rest. Yeah, fair play to you.
Yeah,
you don't want to be looking after a baby. That's your own personal choice.
It's not that it's a decision.
You probably call to them nightclubs in Dublin, the big nightclubs all over Dublin. Then you don't want to be minding the baby at home. That's your personal choice. Fair play to you.
But do you not think that everybody should?
Married, are you?
I'm not married. No.
No, well, you're single, girl. Fair play to you.
Yeah.
You're a lucky woman, aren't you?
I actually regard myself as I am. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You have your freedom. You can go to anywhere or go to Spain or go anywhere you like. You don't have to mind a child. Yeah.
But do you honestly think that incentivizing women to have children, you think that will increase birth?
Yeah, owned. And there's a sense. I don't think everyone who doesn't have kids is like a sad sack of shit or whatever necessarily, but a lot of women in the West are they're basically Pied Pipered. So the way I see it is it's sort of like, it's funny because it's like a child's fairy tale or parable or whatever that they would read, where like these old, hundreds of years old Grimm's Brothers, whatever tales, where even children are supposed to know that, what is familiar and what is close to you and what is old and tried and tested and known and trustworthy is to be held close. And the idea that you wander into the forest and some wolf dressed up in something else starts telling you, I've got this great opportunity for you if you just come with me and you do this. We're taught through our stories to avoid that, to be careful of the fox telling you these, giving you these opportunities, or why don't you come to my place for dinner? It's much better. It's boring back there in the village. And I think what a generation of women have done, not a whole generation, but a subsection of political people, radio presenters, people who are offered the city life or whatever, they they believed it all. And next thing they wake up and they're 47 and they realize where they're at. And that's who I feel bad for. If they're all throughout history, there have been women who just didn't have kids. And it was a tiny minority, but there were some and it didn't suit them and they were atypical or whatever, or had various reasons. But in this day and age, that's not what's going on. There's a whole swathe of women who, if it weren't for this ideology that they've been brainwashed in, especially since maybe the turn of the century, like around the year 2000, post 2000 sort of Sex and the City stuff or whatever, girl boss careers and all that sort of thing, having experiences, being in Bali when you're 32, still having a great time, all that, and then told that like in order to be a wife and a mother is like being chained to the stove. It's like some hell. And then, like I said, you have Handmaid's Tale and the rest of it. Yeah, they're going to wake up when they're 45 someday and they'll have a sore back and they're getting old and they realize that the same state effectively that sold them that idea is now putting them in a position where they have to spend €1,600 on rent, bare minimum, and they can't save for a mortgage or they're too old to get one. They're screwed and they're looking into complete oblivion. And when they go back to that same state and say, look, things haven't worked out for me, what are you going to do for me? The state's going to go, I don't know. Yeah, what am I to you? I'm just some strange, it's like the fox and it's saying, it's not my problem. And you've abandoned you've abandoned what would have been familiar, which is like, your granny might have said to you when you were 26, hey, maybe you should find a good man now and start looking around, and maybe now's the time, and that guy likes you, he's a good guy, he might not be really flashy or like something out of the telly, but he's a good guy and I think he could love and care for you and you could support each other and build each other up over time and have a beautiful family. She's like, no, I don't want to. My granny's such a retard, sorry, but like, she doesn't know what the people on TV or on Instagram told me. They're way smarter. And now, again, fast forward to 20 years later, she's 45 and she's staring down the barrel of a complete oblivion, like biological almost oblivion. Total loneliness. Because, of course, as you get older, once you get past, depending on the person, but for a lot of people, when you get past, 25 out of college, a few years pass by, you don't make friends that quick. You know, you don't just make buddies the way you do when you're 17 at parties, and you don't even go to that many parties, and friends you had, you know, people drift apart into their own lives. And so you'll realize, oh shit, I was totally I was totally screwed over here. I'm kind of on my own, and I don't have the reason people had families even like 200-300 years ago for the entirety of human history. One was just it was nature, one was for the want of it. But famously, another reason was well, yeah, you need like, we're not islands, you know, we need people to look after us. And when they're weak and we're strong, we look after them. And when you need your kids looked after, your granny helps you with it. And when granny's sick and sore and dying or infirm, you help her, and so does your child help her too, or him, granddad. And that's, otherwise we're out in the cold, we're out in the blizzard by ourselves, and entropy is just going to swallow us up. Or we're going to be sat in front of a TV in some like apartment, yeah, on our own. It's like, it's almost as bad, like depressed, popped out of your head on medication or whatever, because it's what kind of hell is that to live in, right? And so a lot of these people are going to realize that, and even trying, which I'll get onto in a second, trying to raise kids without support, without family, with a job, working a job, doing it all basically with no village around you and no division of labor between mother and father in terms of work, like home life and work life and all that. You know, basically people are starting to wake up from a slumber and kind of go, what has happened here? I thought this was meant to be amazing. I thought this was freedom, and it's actually slavery, right? So there was more on that. It was as printable. I'll just skip that, right? And I'll close these tabs too while I'm at it. Free up a little bit of CPU. I think that's what they call it. So the idea, okay, so they're all freaking out because he used the word breed, right? That's the big deal. But what they're really annoyed by, actually, this is just another point I wanted to make. I'm so sick of, this is why I want like debates between people across the political spectrum, like a culture of debating of ideas and a little bit of intellectualism, or is because as the media have it now, the way our society, and as people are brainwashed with, is to sort of react like children to individual words. So he made a whole case there that's excellent, could be enjoyed by a left winger, right winger. It's just stating the obvious, a much understated point, like as in it's not often stated enough, and he stated it at length, you know, 10-20 minute interviews. And the whole thing, the headlines, the aghastness or whatever, is all about that he used the word breed. Now, as he said himself, he's a farmer / builder, so he works in farming, and so that word is colloquial to him, right? When you're talking about population numbers or whatever, you think at the mass scale, like you wouldn't say an individual should breed, but if you're talking about a whole country, you might kind of revert to that farming lexicon that you have, or whatever the word is, nomenclature. And I agree, it's sort of like a, you know, if I were a PR advising him, I'd be like, don't really use that word, right? But you can see why he used it. He's a sort of a middle-aged guy, farmer, you know, it's just a word. Again, I'd be like, I'd listen to that and I go, oh, maybe not the best choice of words. But the idea that our sort of pop mass culture or whatever, political culture, is obsessed with this stuff, I'm kind of not into it, to be honest, myself. Like, I'll give you an example, to be fair, from the other side of the political spectrum. When that councillor, who I would very much not like, she's or politician from the west of Ireland, I don't know or care what her name is, but while the hate speech bill was being done, she said that all laws effectively restrict freedom in some way. So we are restricting freedom with the hate speech thing, and everyone got outraged by that. And I suppose it was good propaganda, good media to sort of undermine the hate speech bill. But if I'm being totally honest, when I heard that, I was like, well, she, on fact of the matter, she's correct about that. All laws do that, so she's kind of just being frank and real about it. So I wasn't outraged by like her comment. Maybe it was good promotional material for the lads, but for me, I was like, well, the problem with the hate speech bill isn't that they're restricting freedoms. Restricting freedoms is what happens when you cross you stop for a red light. It's about the nature of what it's doing, right, and all that. So it's just my personal taste is, yeah, I'll dispute the idea, you know. And it's the same here. It's like, okay, he used the word breeding instead of, which is a synonym for reproducing or whatever. Who cares? Just another thing. Weren't we during COVID told that we had to get herd immunity? Now, you could say that's a medical term in a certain sense, but herd immunity, isn't that calling us animals? Oh, it's an unfortunate word. It's just a word you could take for what it is. Or breeding is a terrible word, but we talk about, as I have here, Ireland's fertility time bomb. Doesn't fertility, like, generally women land, or calling women animals if you say breeding? These are just words. It's like he wasn't calling people animals. It's just nonsense, and so sort of debased as that. Like, if it weren't for that sort of being instilled in people by media, we could actually have interesting open conversations across the spectrum with each other. But of course, we all just jump on kind of like Mitt Romney when he said binders of women, and back in the Obama debates, and lost because of that. I really resent that sort of I don't know what it is, like snapshot, tabloidy level political culture. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. So regardless of that, so the thing is, if you say, let's break down what he said for a sec, right? So take aside the breeding word. He said, and he was specific, he said Irish women. He was being nationalist, or as they would say, racist or far right about it. He's saying Irish women particular. He's not saying as a general human phenomenon within Ireland. He's saying Irish women are not having enough kids. We should do that. And it's like, they would pick up on that too and say, well, that's also not appropriate. That's basically, what's the word? Problematic, or whatever. It's problematic to say, oh, you're saying Irish, you're saying Indigenous women should have, in their own country, should have kids and should be promoted to do so. But and they'll act like, what are you talking about? Why would we go around like weird farmers, basically, or Handmaid's Tale people trying to promote people to have kids like this? That's weird. Just let everybody do their own thing. Like, if the fertility rate is 0.9, or if it's 1.8, or if it's 2.7, who cares? Let just people enjoy their lives, and some people do this and that, and the chips fall where they may. That's the sort of blasé attitude they respond to someone like Tom McDonald with. And then out of the other side of their mouth, the next day they'll say, actually, Ireland's fertility rate is low, and so we need to bring in 1 million migrants every few years against the majority wishes of the country as it is. And you go, like, they'll just start by saying they want to do it, and they give the demographic argument. Suddenly they're all about the demographics. The demographics are crucial for the economy, for this, for that, the other. And again, they want to have it kind of both ways. And when you turn around and say, well, maybe we should just promote Irish women to have kids because that's a better, like, it requires more investment and more time, but it's a more sustainable idea, and it's more in tune with the wish of the public. Basically, it's less socially catastrophic, we'll say, and perhaps economically so as well. And yeah, they just, I have an article here. It's in the Examiner. It's a mainstream writer, mainstream publication. Ireland's fertility time bomb, falling population, a dangerous territory for society and the economy. So suddenly it's a dangerous territory. But if you had been saying what Tom McDonald said 30 years ago, hey, it's falling below 2, why don't we start trying to report it now as best we can? They would have said, oh, what are you, some sort of Bishop Brennan? It's annoying. And then they turn around and do this. So it's a long-winded article. It goes through all, like, it's almost something I could have written myself, It's a good, solid, detailed point about demographics and pension, you name it, and the reasons for it, and the fact that it's across the West and it's in Korea. You know the argument. Obviously, I don't need to read it necessarily, but so yeah, they're saying the country has to address it, and they basically outline that yeah, you have 3 options, or a couple of options. One is mass migration, one is trying to up birth rates or whatever. And so it's like, okay, so mainstream publications will say that one of the options is migration, the other is birth rate. But then when you come along and you say, hey, should we do something about birth rates? They look at you like, what are you talking about? So it's like, okay, so it is a problem. Theoretically, one of the things would be birth rates, but when you bring it up, it's like you have 10 heads. And here's an example of it, right? This is from Gript. I hope they don't mind me using this. It's a bit out of date now. This is last year's article, so I'm not stealing thunder. Ben Scallon asks Heather Humphreys, Minister for whatever it is, social protection, a really good question here. What's the headline? So, Ireland has no plan to deal with demographic time bomb. He asks her basically, what's the plan for upping birth rates? And she's like, I don't know, we don't have one. Like, so there you go. Watch this. It's
Minister, you
actually a mad
referred to
clip.
PRSI measures to help fund pensions long term, but we know that our
By the way, just watch out as he asks her the question, as she attempts to answer it. Look at the way she looks at him. She's like befuddled. She's like,
Ireland is
I don't
facing a
know.
pensions time bomb because of our aging demographics. Ireland's population is one of the fastest aging in Europe due to our rapidly falling birth rate. And your government departments are warning that this will pose a huge challenge for the future of public services like health. So during the budget discussions, did the topic of increasing Ireland's birth rate come up at all during those meetings?
Well, obviously, I'm looking at increasing we will be bringing in an increase into the PRSI rate, as I said, next year. Can I just say the Social Insurance Fund is doing extremely well. There's almost 5 billion of a surplus. So what we're bringing in here are small incremental increases. Now's the time to do it. We're not putting it on the long finger. It's been done. And I will be bringing further details when I bring through the social protection bill. And of course, obviously, the statistics and the actuarials take into account all of these things and as to what expected population increases are and what the demographics are, and that's what they do.
So do we have any measures, like I think France is also doing something in the area of encouraging people to have bigger families and things like that, Hungary and other countries in Europe like that, or are we doing anything like that?
Well, no, not that I'm aware of, but we do have the child. Yeah, we have other things as well. We have parents' benefit payment, and we have
children's allowance, which hasn't increased in donkey's years, despite inflation, mass inflation, or rapid inflation. So they're basically admitting that they don't really care about it by increasing it with inflation. So they're not even doing the bare minimum, really. Yeah, she grabs a piece of paper who her advisor has passed her, like, children's allowance. Like, see, it's like, that's not what we're talking. We're talking about exceptional new measures to increase birth rates in Ireland. And she's just like looking at him like he's 10 heads. And this is what I find funny. They're like, oh, we wouldn't interfere with that. Like, that's not a state thing. I don't know. It just hasn't occurred to us. But if you said, what are you doing to make trans acceptance more popular or more comfortable among 12-year-olds, they could list out a raft of policies. They're taking strong initiative on that. What about the world allegedly increasing by a few degrees according to controversial and debated forecasts and the rest of it? Like, even though China is pumping out coal and India left, right and center, and Ireland can do nothing about it, but you're going to change the weather with, like, making poor people a little bit poorer. She'd be like, yeah, we're on top of that. We're definitely addressing the global climate. Ireland is. But if you say, well, what about just the basic concept of human reproduction within a territory? Like, surely that's a bit of a big deal, no? Like, when it crossed below 2 replacement, like 2 per woman. Like, was that not, did the state not sit down and have a big conversation? No, we know they did. And they just said, let's bring in like 4 million Africans without asking anyone. But it's like, what really should have happened there was a discussion. The discussion might have entailed reintroducing sort of like national pride, promoting religious values, promoting certain values that would lend themselves to or accentuating those that would lend themselves to reproduction, while having a modern, almost left-wing financial incentive program, like strong incentive, not degrading all of these things culturally and financially, these institutions, marriage, the rest of it. And then maybe we'll bring in some foreigners to plug the gap a little bit as well, but it'll be a mixed bag sort of approach. But they didn't do that. They just said, no interest. We'll do everything we can to collapse birth rates while bringing in 5 million Africans. That's basically the conversation that happened behind the scenes at a national and a pan-Western level. And now it's just, they just look at you with shrugged shoulders, when you ask about it or when you mention it. But so I want to talk about some potential solutions, right? And this is just the financial one. Now, it doesn't all come down to financial incentives, but that goes a heck of a long way, because people talk about national and ethno-national and religious pride, all these different things, right? Keith Woods mentioned the case of Georgia, an elder Orthodox patriarch promising to be the godfather of every born child, and it became like a social contagion. Everybody started having kids. there are all these different angles you can look at. I don't know. But let's just take the most obvious sort of straightforward one, which is money. The reason I say that is because you already have, I don't know, tens of thousands, whatever number of pent up will to have babies. People who want to have babies. It's not that they don't need their arm twisted. They're not demoralized. They're not antinatalist. They're none of that. They would definitely have another baby. They just look at their bottom line and they go, we just kind of can't do it. So basically releasing that amount of people, or that segment of people, would immediately be a huge thing. And I'll just give you an example of what you could do. So it's the obvious here, which is also something Tom McDonald mentioned, which is the money we're spending on the asylum scam thing and like mass migration in general. So I'll just do a quick go through the numbers, right? So, and this is all loose enough. This is a concept thought experiment. You don't have to take it totally literally, but some numbers. So we have here almost €500 million paid for asylum refugee accommodation in 3 months. This article came from Matt Tracy in early 2024 this year, but it's referring back to 2023, and it shows that a total of 484 plus million was paid out in just the third quarter of 2023. So let's just round it off to 500 billion in 1 quarter of 2023. And the rates, next slide, please. You see here that the rates, now 2023 was a big year and 2022 was a big year as well, and the rest of it, but it's trending well upwards. You can see from 23 to 24, it's gone up a lot. So if you had 500 billion spent in 1 quarter of 2023, then extrapolated that out for 4 quarters, it would be 2 billion. And then this year it's trending much higher again. So you'd expect it to be more than 2 billion, let's say. And then on top of that, last year had total arrivals, or sorry, this year's total arrivals are up until April, the end of April, it was 6,500. So that would be, let's do my math. So that's 4 months. Okay, so almost 5 months. 5 months really. So basically that looks like if that were to continue on those numbers, you'd get up around something like 18,000 asylum seekers, I don't know, somewhere there. You wouldn't get to 30,000, and we have articles of Roderick O'Gorman saying that they expect to be taking 30,000. So basically what I'm saying is it's a certain number last year, then it's greater this year, and then we can expect, according to our own government officials, that it's going to be greater again in subsequent years. So what I'm saying is this is all trending upwards. But if you just take last year at a roughly 2 billion cost for accommodation and all other services for these people, what I'm saying is I'll use the number 2 billion, but that's conservative because it's only trending up and up and up and up. The other reason it's conservative is because that's the asylum program. But of course, what about Joseph Puska, let's say the murderer of Aisling Murphy? People like him, so many like him. Think of all the people who loiter around O'Connell Street and all over the towns and cities of our country. Think of all these different types of people. Think of the burden that's put on the state from translation services and from this and that and the other. Think of the money that's spent on so-called anti-racism NGOs to effectively suppress resistance to this whole project. Hundreds of millions, probably. A lot of money. Think of all the things that are mainstreamed into HR policies at work and in schools and the rest of all that's money. Think of all the people who, let's say, because they didn't want to live in a multicultural inner city, they moved out to the suburbs, and so that adds transport costs, property costs, the inflation by just having more people, the more that's spent. So that's not a GDP thing or a government spending, but it's spent out of your pocket by having to pay for a house that's twice as much. You could slice it a million ways and it would be a heck of a lot more than this 2 billion figure I'm kind of throwing at you. Even the asylum thing will be more than that, but then you could probably, I don't know, double, triple, who knows that, if you were to take a broader look at the mass migration replacement project. But because I'm a good guy, I'll be conservative and I'll just go with the 2 billion, right? Because that's stark. It's directly providing for these people. So it's really unambiguous, right? So we'll go with that. And what you have is, and I can be corrected if someone wants to call me wrong, but I looked up, let's say, how many marriages in a year in Ireland, like in some recent year, and how many births, right? Just to try and see what if you funneled the money over, right? What would you be left with? So marriages was whatever it was, and then births. This is just a side point: is that births have been 2021 year there were a fair few babies, and then it dropped significantly to 54,000 afterwards, and then it's gone down roughly. This is sort of slight back of the envelope, but I think it's gone down another 4,000 since. So it's actually, the birth rate is rapidly declining, which if you're living in Ireland in the last 2 years, you won't be surprised. Say you're a single man and you're 30. Think of the squeeze that's been put on you. Now imagine you had been considering having a kid, or maybe a third kid. Think of how impossible that would seem, right? So there's a direct disincentive to have kids with the economic squeeze now, but and you can see it in the crashing birth rates. But anyway, back to the numbers about reallocating asylum funds, right, to promote reproduction. So I have here, so it's basically 50,000 were probably born in 2023, somewhere there roughly. And I'm going to say that I think this is obviously conservative. 50,000, let's say 10,000 of those 50 were foreigners. That's almost certainly on the conservative end, but it's definitely reasonable. Let's just say 40,000 Irish women had babies. This is all conservative. 40,000 have babies. And then marriages, you have 23,100 marriages. And let's say round it down to 20,000 to shave off the foreign marriages, whether sham or otherwise, but just like, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at promoting Irish birth rates here. So 40,000 Irish births, 20,000 Irish marriages. Go that way, or we'll say that. If you were to break down 2 billion to that, then you would have, this is all just spitballing sort of thought experiment. You might find flaws. This is not my stated policy. I know there are reasons why it would be difficult to do this policy, or in practice, let's say, but thought experiment. If you broke your 2 billion down and you said, let's promote marriages, let's just take marriages as a conduit for people having kids, young people hitching up to have kids. Basically, we'll use marriage as a proxy for the people who could do with a boost to have kids, as opposed to going around examining their reproductive faculties and trying to read their minds and all that. We'll just take marriages. So given that there's 20,000 marriages in a year and 2 billion is spent every year on asylum, say you just said, the government came out and said, we're just going to stop doing asylum. We'll just totally stop. We are the national government. We have supranational partners and all that, but we're just going to do what China does, what Singapore does, what loads of people do, and just say, yeah, no asylum seekers, not the end of the world, live with it. Not cut back, just eliminate. Nobody can come to Ireland to apply for asylum at all. Sorry, it's a big world. We're a small country. We already took loads, so go on off. And the ones that are here for the most part can go on off as well. Let's say the government decided to do that, and then they have this big 2 billion minimum spare. They go back to marriages and they say, okay, so for every married couple in a year now, we can give them 100,000 euro, just a check, just 100,000 euro into the pocket. Do you think that would not have an influence on birth rates? Do you think that would not promote marriage? And then if you say, well, let's not look at marriages, let's do it per birth sort of thing. And you look at births. So if there's 40,000 Irish births and you split the 2 billion that way, you would have, for every birth, you could go to the parents of that child and hand them a 50,000 euro check and say, there you go, congratulations. And here's another sort of way of looking at it too. I'm sort of spurging out here on it a little bit, but one of the counter arguments someone could say is, well, like, you're trying to increase birth rates. So if you go to the 40,000 who've had babies already, and you give them their allocated 50,000 euro, then that's not going to promote birth rates, because you've blown your 2 billion on the ones who've already had the kids. And so you're not going to get any more. You're just handing people who have already had the kids money. That doesn't make sense. So let's just, again, this is all very loose. Let's say you split the 50,000 you split it in half, and you say for all the ones who would already have babies, we'll give 25,000 to, and now there's just another 20,000 parcels of 50,000 on top of the existing birth rates, or sorry, another 20,000 that is just waiting to be claimed. You just need someone needs to have the baby, and there's a 25,000 euro check waiting for you. It'll be given to you in the maternity ward, like, you know, so up to you. You can take it or leave it, you know. I think there's a lot of people who'd be jumping off the fence thinking, yeah, let's get that, lads. And in terms of marriages, it would be the same. If you weren't thinking about getting married already, basically what you do is divide it in half. So it would be 50,000. But again, this is all very loose, because people say, oh, well, that wouldn't be fair, and how would you do this, and how would you do that, and how would you make it make sense? Yeah, you could basically sit down with a whiteboard all day long trying to parse it out how best to do it. But my point is, in theory, there would be somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 25 to 100,000, depending on how you split it, per person to just have a kid. And that would be every year, because of course the 2 billion would be refreshed every year, as it is for asylum seekers now. So like, there's huge money around. And like I said, the 2 billion doesn't even cover it, because it's really probably, I don't know, more like 4 billion or something like that when you factor in other expenses on different types of migrants who don't necessarily need to be here. You know, you're dealing with it. This is not complaining because a pothole cost extra or whatever, and you could have spent that money. This is big, big, big money, right? You're talking, like, I got specific there, but let's just end the specifics. You're talking about billions and billions and billions, where basically you could go to, and you could even incentivize it for people you could try to make it so that it's like ordinary, decent people in the middle class. They're not on the dole, but they're not really rich, but they're good people. They just are in the squeeze middle in some fashion. And it's like, but they're really good people, the kind of people you'd love to have kids. And say, hey, have a kid. Basically, we'll cover it. Like, at the very least, we'll cover the cost of the kid. Or at least, you know, your first few years getting off the ground with that kid will be sorted. You'll be able to pay for that new car. You'll be able to get that extension. You'll be able to do this, that, and the other. Like, these kind of hurdles, that other things you were caught with having to spend money on: new house, new car, blah, 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 clothes. Like, we'll take a big chunk out of that for you. Or we could even get you across the line to being able to get a house on your own in the market by just handing you the check. That would make a huge difference for people. And the thing is, as well, it would be every single year. It would be upped again for more people. So, like, think about the cumulative effect of several billion every year being put where it should be put. Of course, the birth rates would go up. You know, there's many other ways. Like, I know for sure that if you handed me the keys to the car for the country without being forcing people to have kids or the Handmaid's Tale or any of that, with all just positive incentives, but cutting off the migration bullshit, cutting off all these negative things, cutting off foreign vulture funds owning houses, paying low tax, but, you know, this general foreign enslavement, like whatever the opposite of sovereignty is, colonialism. If I had carte blanche to just sort of start ending that here and there and promote all these positive things for people, I have no doubt in my mind. In a way, it's a miracle that it is 1.6 or whatever it is still. So getting it up to like 2.6 or whatever, in my view anyway, with all the capacity for financial incentive, and to turn the culture from a totally toxic one into a really healthy one, would be easy enough. And recreate, and we'll get into this in a second, the idea that people are on their own when they have kids. They don't have a village around them, so to speak. Trying to change that, trying to actively, because our government at the moment have no interest in that. They're just watching everyone have to ping pong around the country to find a house or whatever to survive, or ping pong abroad. You know, you could easily say, okay, well, let's actually take an interest in that. Let's have our smartest minds sit down and think, how can people have kids with the modern technologies and with the little bit of rootlessness? But given that that's fundamental to modernity, within that framework, we'll try as best we can to promote a sort of a healthy social atmosphere for having kids, as well as just throwing money at people, as well as fixing the culture up. You know, you can totally see how you could fix it. There's a point as well, actually, someone made. I'll go back to that Ben Scallon video there. This is a good point, just by the way, because if you're wondering, like, well, why don't they just do that? Like, that seems logical. That seems very positive and nice. Why wouldn't they do that? Someone made a comment here, said it's all about economics, the agenda of the last few governments. blah blah blah. But he gets onto a good point. He says consider it's basically just same way Gombeans sell out their community to get a quick buck, or companies want to hire cheap foreign labor, like Starbucks wants to hire kind of suppressive wage growth people like foreigners, Brazilians and stuff in their shops to work for more or less minimum wage and never answer back and be afraid of getting fired because they have no other support network, and you know, a nice malleable cheap labor force, and then they'll sell you a cup of coffee that costs €6.50. You know, like, why wouldn't they? It's quicker, better, quicker bucks for the big boys, shareholders and all that. It's kind of like, it's the same ethos except with human beings and population replacement. So he puts it well here. He says, consider the cost of an Irish baby from conception to finishing school at 17 or college in the early 20s. They've been nothing but a financial burden to their parents and the economy because of the parental time off work, education and healthcare. And then they expect graduate level jobs and salaries to or emigrate. Now compare that to a migrant asylum seeker who has made his own way here, hasn't cost the state a penny up to this point, and arrives as a ready-made worker, grateful to accept any living conditions and menial work. You know, and you could say, well, a lot of them go on state benefits, but a lot of them actually do work these menial jobs, picking strawberries, you name it, pouring cups of coffee. It's like these big interests do just want, they look at it and they say, okay, like if you were to say to them, let's have this pronatal policy, let's do all this stuff, and look, give us a couple of decades and you'll have your population that can sustain pensions and they can do the jobs, and you know, it'll be like that, like 2.5, something like that, just a decently, slightly growing population, and it'll tip away fine, and then businesses can operate within that framework. You can still do your business. Everybody wins, surely. The nation wins, the business can still be done. The pension bomb, we can sort of reconcile that a little bit, figure it out. But they're like, why would we do that? I mean, that's possible. Anyone would acknowledge that's a doable proposition if the will was there. But they go, yeah, but or I could just bring in a load of Brazilians and Pakistanis and stuff like that and like make a killing right now, and I don't really care about anyone else. That's basically the ethos. It's like there is no grander value. There is no statesmanship or like looking across a time span of at least 50 years or something, planning ahead properly for things that are greater than just the economy. That's not being done, so we end up with what we end up with. And so where was I? We sort of, I was just kind of looking at the cost of these things, but you know, it's kind of like that's where we're at, and so that's why I think there's a huge conversation to be had. It's like with not just right wing people in an echo chamber. It's like, no, like lefties and apolitical people, like they're totally reachable by talking to them and just saying, listen, at the end of the day, a population has to replace itself, at least just replace itself or grow. Or at least that's how we have it. That's what we've been set up with these pensions for elderly people and stuff. So in some fashion, we do need to grow at some level, or at least sustain ourselves, or at least not go into massive decline. There are various ways we could go about it, but the state has just decided to completely abandon human reproduction, native reproduction, because they're not even interested in foreign reproduction. That's the thing. It's not even a national question. That's how ugly it is. It's just anti-human as well at a certain level, because they're not saying, we'll bring in all these Africans and Muslims and they're going to reproduce like crazy, so they'll have the babies that we won't or something. Because it's well understood that when migrants come to the West, they're affected by this toxic economic and cultural situation, and their birth rates go straight down to native birth rates very quickly because they're human too. So it's like they don't even want like a feckin', what's the word, like a fertile foreign population to come in and have all the babies. They're not interested in babies. They're like, babies are surplus to requirement. They're just basically another burden. So we just want ready-made, microwave goes bing, 26-year-old randomers who have nothing else but their job, but the state, etc. And that's what we want. Like, you know, that's economically productive. And of course, a human society, we can't go from millennia of human society that operates on intergenerationality, social contracts, culture, the basic concept of human culture, which is not just a random thing like culture, like a fella playing a saxophone on the side of the street or whatever. Culture is the way in which human beings form shared things in order to cope with being alive and to construct a coherent and healthy society in which to live, and relate with each other. Like, I don't know, there's a garbled enough definition, but it's something like that. Culture is, as much as it's like a nice pub with a fiddle playing in the corner. Culture, in a deeper sense, is almost like a biological function needed for human beings inherently, right? It's just it's sort of like we need air and water, and then to some lesser extent, some more general abstract sense, we need culture. And culture isn't the immigrant council bringing Africans in and some bongos and some white NGO people and like some other people awkwardly dancing around because they're all paid money, or like culture week. Or culture is a deeper, more primordial and sort of natural and organic human thing. It's an emergent phenomenon among people, right? And it can't be forced. It can't be created by the state or something like that necessarily. It can be fostered, let's say, but that's as good as you can do. Point being, it's essential. All of these things are essential to human life. We need to be around old people and young people and talk to each other. We need to just talk to people. It's human. We are social animals, and all the rest of it. So it's like there's such a big breakdown there that, like I say, for the only people who are talking about this coherently are called far right, and I just think that's it's a big opportunity to liaise with sort of not the average Joe on the street, but all of these millennial and Gen Z influencers and people who like to think about stuff and they're a YouTuber or they write articles or whatever. You know, it's very easy to grab all these people, the tastemakers, and sort of try, even though they're paid to not hear it, let's say, largely, to try to say, listen, like, you can call me what you want here, but I'm stating a pretty basic human reality. Like, this is car crash territory we're looking at. You cannot just bring in a few million Africans or whatever every few years for the most base economic profiteer reasons. And that's your way of sustaining an economy. Like, you can't live in an economy that's based on doing that. An economy / society. It like the reason everything is going to hell in front of you before your very eyes, especially generationally for those under 40 odd, it's got to do with this stuff, and you can't really run away from it. You know, like the idea that you're trying to raise kids with 2 jobs. I've said it before, but you wake up at 7 o'clock, there's like a military regime in order to get lunches made. Somebody's crying because they fell over. Okay, get back on the table, clean up the breakfast table. Do all 2-3 kids have their lunches? They need their blah blah blahs. They need a note for school. Then you're going to work and you're thinking, shit, I didn't complete that file yesterday. I didn't do this or that yesterday. The boss is onto me. I have a client who's ringing me for invoices or whatever it is. So you've got all your work stuff going on. So does your wife or your husband. And then the 3 kids have to go to school, and then they get in, or school / childcare, which you're paying a whole wage on. Then you get in there to work, and there's all this shit going on. It's stressful inherently because it's work. And you had to commute like another 20 minutes from the childcare, drop them all off, and then go. Then you do your day's work, and of course, if one of the kids is sick, one of you get the call, and one of you has to go. So now it's another. There's no resiliency. There's no redundancy in the system of loads of grannies or tons of family, nieces, nephews, loads of people around, for a lot of people anyway, because they're all busy too. And so then you get back at 5 o'clock. Collect the kids from after childcare or care or whatever it's called, which you pay more for. Then everyone's back collected in the house more or less by kind of 6 o'clock. And then people need showers. The dishwasher needs to be flipped out, changed. You need to get dinner on. Homework needs to be done. You name it, just life shit, right? All that happens. And then it's like 8 o'clock, kids are going to bed. You're like a slave. You're like, you don't see your kids. You barely see, then you see them for a bit at the weekend, but you're knackered, right? Knackered every evening, knackered at the weekend. And then you also have, oh shit, the electricity were ringing me. They said the payment, oh, there's an issue. I have to get on, do bureaucracy with them, or I have to do my motor tax. I have to do this. Like, all this stuff is heaped on you. And this is a lot on mothers. It affects them, I think, even more. But people in general, mothers and fathers, that's all on top of you. And then, of course, you're, in this sort of disconnected neighborhood, probably a lot of foreigners around, people you don't know either way. And it's kind of like, and then the government that year brings in another 200,000 people while you're paying your mortgage for a house that's twice as much as what it ever should have been. And the whole lot, it's just like, this is not a way for human beings to live. It's no surprise birth rates are rapidly declining. And at some point, someone has to shout stop and say, hey, like, it might not be all about the foreigners. That's obviously an essential thing that has to stop. But it doesn't stop. It doesn't end with that. There's more to it. The whole social model that's been foisted on people since, like, what, the year, for a long time, but like what became rapidly mainstream after the year 2000 sort of thing. That mode of having a family and having jobs and keeping a household and like that whole life does not work. It's a car crash and nobody wants it. Like, to a man, nobody wants that. And we're all just being enslaved by it. So like the answers require solutions that are what you might think are left-wing economic stuff, and then right-wing, which is that if you're going to fix this stuff, you have to stop bringing in 200,000 foreigners a year, right? We all know that's a key part of it. Like what's the word? When they build an arch, this keystone that holds it all up. If you take that out, the whole thing does fall down, and then you need to do more to rebuild it. But like the real, I don't know what the analogy is. That's why I focus on immigration so much. It's not just some aversion to it that I have personally or whatever, or the fact that it's so obviously glaringly bad, but it's that I recognize immigration is the I'm looking for one of you to give me the flying buttress. I don't know, is that it? Yeah, something like that. It is the keystone, the linchpin of the entire thing. You pull that out, and whatever happens, the edifice of what we're currently under cannot sustain itself. It that falls apart, and then some rebuilding might take place. And without doing that, you can't fix it. It's sort of, yeah, it's like a necessary but not sufficient. You know, there is no policy on earth, like all these other policies about readjusting foreign ownership of property and more work-life balance with the family and better built towns that are more centralized, or sort of more like this kind of rail and spoke system or whatever it's called, like this urban planning that sort of works and good quality stuff and more free time for people, you name it. All these other policies, I won't disagree. A lot of them are excellent and they would be great, right? And I'd pursue them. But no other policy you can mention can fix this or can be sustained while you have an open or more than an open borders policy, a like drag them in policy for, 5% of the population every year or two, right? That kind of level. So it's almost like that's why I bleed on about that so much, and that's why I think it's a pan-political spectrum issue or point, is that people need to be reached who aren't in the echo chamber to say this has to be addressed. Like all the other ideas that you have might be great, but we can't do anything until you stop that. That has to stop, and then the mammoth task of all the other stuff begins. But until it stops, you can't start anything. You can't. All you're doing is sort of, oh, what's the word? It's like the boat analogy. I'm all back to the analogies again here, but it's like trying to fix your pump for bailing water out of your boat and fix the navigation system, all this kind of stuff, while there's a big huge hole and water's rushing in like crazy. The other stuff is for now. Yeah, like you have to stop that, and then there's lots of other things to do, So, and it all centers around this demographic question and solutions to it and the rest of it. And then it comes back to the fundamental question of the way of life. Like, how do we want to live as human beings? How can we live? It turns out that a lot of the solutions are futuristic in terms of almost relating into not UBI necessarily, but hardcore incentivization of the right things, because we have so much spare technological productivity and stuff. It only makes sense. It's not even Marxism or something. It's just It's like the way when they came up with a tractor, not so many people had to go dragging things across a field. We've gone from tractor to this to that for the last like 50 plus years. There's been so many new layers of like new developed internet, computers, labor saving, communication saving devices, all this. There's been so much of that, and yet we've gone backwards in terms of our lifestyle. So something's gone deeply wrong there, and we can actually reverse that and then take advantage of the technological productive added value, let's say, And so that would lead to futuristic almost levels of economic or technological changes for the better. But then they would almost lead us back to a past lifestyle where you would have a mother at home or a parent at home or something like that. Something that almost in a weird way accidentally ends up resembling like a Dev's Ireland in a fashion, or at least that idea of like home, you know, a home life and a family and a community and all that. You know, it's so rich in potential, this whole thing, you know, when you think about it. And it could have appeal for everyone. It doesn't involve even necessarily compelling people to do this and that. I could go on about it, like, you know, basically what I think is we've come full circle from traditionalism, thrown it out the window. And I think people have rapidly caught up on the fact that actually, if we weren't enslaved, without De Valera having to tell women they can't work after they're married, without having to have any of those policies, which are unsustainable these days politically and whatever, people are past that. But if you actually just gave people the choice, you would, before long, have a lot of stay-at-home moms. You know, that's kind of my point, is that like by just taking the boot off the neck, you wouldn't have to put any other boot on the neck. You would just have we would just or almost return to tradition, but in a future-oriented way. Anyway, so with all that said, I want to listen to these clips. So it's Keelan Moncrief. I've kind of had beef with her, not beef with her. It's kind of one way, to, if I'm being honest, right? I don't know if she probably just blocked me, but I had an issue in the past. She was, and it's funny because I think she's kind of likable. She's David, what's her name? His name? Sean Moncrief, radio broadcaster's daughter. I think she's a likable, intelligent, listenable person, right? I was a female listener of this show, mine, put me onto this. I don't sit around listening to these things, but I am familiar with, you know, generally familiar with her. And I was reminded listening to it, that, yeah, she is listenable, she's intelligent and all that. And she almost seems sound enough, right? But sort of plugged into this regime ideology of like, I don't know, liberal, people call it wokeism or smash the patriarchy or end racism, be vegan, you know, you name it, like all into that stuff, and has like brand responsibilities and stuff. So it's funny, you listen to someone like her and you think, I wonder, like, I think they would have a lot of interesting stuff to say if they were like liberated from all that, if they could just say anything. This is kind of a strange way of introducing the point, but she had 2 podcasts recently, right? And someone put me in touch to listen to these, and I did listen to them, and it was worth doing because she had this Instagram influencer called Melanie Murphy, who's sort of similar, let's say, seems sound enough, but again is part of the, you know, the establishment kind of progressive or talking points and all that. And then Louise McSharry, who's a radio broadcaster, who seems like more of a hardcore, like radical liberal ideologue or whatever. But my point is that this girl, Keelan Moncrief, is a mother, and the 2 others are mother. I think the podcast is called Mother. It's about cool brunch having millennial women, or Zoomer women, whatever, who have kids, have kind of come of age that they're now the mams, and discussing mam issues, whether it's postnatal depression, whether it's how to discipline your kid, or what it's like engage, how your friendships are affected by having kids, or, you know, just talking about it, right? And you can obviously see how this is relevant to what I've spoken about thus far, is that you're hearing people who are inside the house, they establish, like, they do their own blogs and stuff, but they're signed up to ad deals, and you know what I mean, they're part of all that. They're not dissidents or outsiders or whatever, and they're trying to discuss the reality that's in front of them and reconcile it with their, I don't know what the word is, liberal priors, their liberal worldview that they're meant to have. And yet they're struggling to reconcile their lived experience, especially in this day and age, with that as their mothers and as they have to raise kids and experience the world as it is. And you can hear the contradictions just sing out to you with this. And so I just want to play a couple of examples to give you a point. So I'll start with Melanie Murphy. I thought this was a good one. I'll kind of walk. It's just like a 1-minute clip of a podcast. Will I be able to find it? So it starts at 30:48. So I'll find it.
And how many?
Yeah. So I found this interesting. I hope you might as well. And this is, of course, fair use, obviously, right? I'm commenting on it. It's only a snippet. 3048, lads. There we go.
Relax. She wants to look after herself, and she's been
Okay, I have it on like 1.5 speed, but that's just going to make me sound slow. So I will put it back to normal speed. This, like, it might seem strange, this, but it's totally relevant. This is like a real example of like popular media. A lot of women are sitting at home listening to these people, right? And relate to these people, and actually, like, they are kind of, it is decent media, and it is like, it's better. Put it this way: this is a lot better than watching TV3 political social commentary or whatever. Like, you know, they're actually, it's almost like I say, almost accidentally getting at the point, dangerously veering into it a little bit. But anyway, so
been
the
saying
point,
since we were teenagers, she
3048,
was
what
like, I'm
it?
sick of being a mom. I'm done. You know, I'm over it. Like, I just want to, you know, go on
Relax.
holidays and relax.
Yeah.
But it is the generation before us where they got the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
You can go back to work. This is feminism.
Mm.
You can put those pants on, girl. You can sit
Yeah.
at the table with us. But that's not equality.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that isn't having it all. And I think now we're all coming to the realization this generation is like, this isn't actually community. It's
Yeah.
not humanity.
No.
It's not love and compassion. It's
Yes.
not a matriarchy at all. It's the absolute, you know,
Absolutely.
opposite
It's so
of that.
nice hearing you say that. It's so funny because I know I'm older than you and stuff, but like I look up to you. It's weird. Like when I'm watching your content, it's just like I literally, and no, I'm not trying to be like ageist or whatever. Like people are probably gonna cancel me just for saying that. But genuinely, like I think that because would you be considered Gen Z?
I think I'm on the
You're
cusp,
on the
in
cusp.
between.
Because I just feel like, yeah, like younger people are just so much wiser to certain things than my generation, and like just
quick interjection. One thing she says, I know that sounds ageist. I know I'm going to be cancelled for that, or I hope I'm not cancelled for that. So one, acutely aware of the political shackles that they're under, right? Like even for something as petty and like nonsense as ageism. She's kind of being flippant, but point is like they're aware of things like ageism. Imagine such a ridiculous concept. Say whatever you want to say, right? I mean, you say what you want to say. Who cares, right? Surely you should be entitled to just say whatever you want to say, have your opinion. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't know. But the second thing is that she mentions Jay-Z, 99 Problems Jay-Z, but like no, Gen Z. I can't keep up with these terms because I'm a boomer, but she mentions Gen Z being sort of more in tune with these things. And what I think what she's referring to there is the idea that Gen Z have almost rediscovered their independence a little bit under the pressure of the modern world. So they've what millennials struggled with, Gen Z have come to grips with a little bit better, which is that millennials went to college, got a master's, and then went to work in Starbucks or went to work in Deloitte in Dublin, or, you know, so that whether they go higher or lower, there was an aspect of like, yeah, but the rent is so much there, it gobbles up even the Deloitte salary and stuff. It's very hard to live, you know. And they ended up getting kind of caught. It was like the boomer parents had told them, if you go to college, you'll be rich and so successful, and you'll have a great life. And it's slow, sort of like it's hit a little bit of a roadblock with Gen Z. They've sort of seen what happened to millennials, and they're sort of doing the like quiet quitting stuff, you know, where they go to work and they just take the piss and do the bare minimum to just not get fired and intentionally play the game and try to, I don't know, like get the dole and then work off in some place in the West Coast, you know, or on the sly, or have some remote job, but also get the dole, work on the West Coast, which previously someone might have said, well, that's unethical or that's strange. But they go, listen, we get so fucked if we play the game, then we're going to start like playing our own game in whatever way we have to. So maybe there's people who've discovered to do stay-at-home mom or even stay-at-home dad or whatever, because they go, it just makes more sense. Life's easier. The bottom line almost evens out. It's got the regime's gotten so bad that it's almost at kind of that point where it's like some people are starting to go, there's barely any point in even working. And if I am, I'm going to do some sort of hybridized, like play the system type of way. Gen Z are the ones who are catching on to that. And also because Gen Z are some people don't like the generational thing. They're like, they get offended by it or something. The generation thing is real. it's not an exact science, but some people are offended by it. It's just a way of looking at changing cultures across time and how it affects different segments of people. Not a huge deal. But Gen Z also have this element where, and I think this does affect it, where there is going to be more stuff where in a crowd of hipsters almost, or like collegey people or whatever, you'll almost have like a low key tradcat type there, or someone who's online, their shit poster. You're going to have more if there's a barbecue in Lahinch with a bunch of 22-year-olds, and you're going to have like more in the way of, while they're having their cultural discussion about, oh yeah, because back in my day it was like, oh, the next big thing is we're going to legalize weed and we're going to end abortion, and it was just this monotonous sort of thing. Whereas now you might have, that's the hegemonic view maybe around the barbecue circle, but there's going to be a couple of lads, a couple of gals who are sort of thinking differently, and it affects it sort of from a liberal point of view. It pollutes the conversation, it disrupts it a little bit, and you're going to have a bit more of that. So in one sense, it's the economic thing is making Gen Z more dynamic under the pressure of the shitty system we're in. And then there's a cultural effect of like the online right kind of thing, like everything from like even Wojak memes, which are ostensibly apolitical, have a sort of right-wing connotation to them. The culture, there's a real cool youth culture. We see it across Europe where right-wing AFDs and stuff are voted in more by the young than by the old. So that's going to have an effect even on someone who's still a lib believer Gen Zer is going to be in their real life, meet some cool guy at the pub who's not like a far right weirdo. They're like cool, they're one of the gang, but they have different beliefs, and that's going to sort of affect them and change, slightly adjust the zeitgeist among the young cool crowd. And so I think there's a bit of that going on. When Melanie Murphy there says, I'm refreshed by hearing your Gen Z attitude about that effectively what we were sold about, like you can have it all, is a big crock of shit. That's just my sort of commentary on.
I literally, and no, I'm not trying to be like ageist or whatever. Like people are probably going to cancel me just for saying that, but genuinely, like I think that because would you be considered Gen Z?
I think I'm on the cusp,
in
between,
because I just feel like, yeah, like younger people are just so much wiser to certain things than my generation, and like just have these conversations out in the open, like in a way that like I still have that feeling of, if I say that.
See the way she's almost speaking about it in hushed tones, these conversations about, basically taking the orthodoxy that they were sold about, you can have it all, feminism, the whole deal. And so yous are criticizing it, like, but I feel, I know I keep interrupting it. Obviously she's speaking for herself, but like, I'm just pointing out the way they're speaking to each other.
People are just more of this in a second. So much wiser to certain things than my generation, and like just have these conversations out in the open, like in a way that like I still have that feeling of, if I say that, people will think I'm anti-feminist to just dare say something like that. Do you know what I mean? And I love that people are acknowledging these things, that like, it is fucking really hard. It's really impossible and the expectations on women are just insane. Like, you don't expect a dad to have his job and also do like all this childcare and house stuff and all at the same time, but we are and have been expected to like do so much that and we've been like, oh, but yeah, we can do it, but like, no. And
can I just say, again, just to comment on the nature of the conversation, if you listen to it back again, let's say, as she's kind of tiptoeing around it, you'll hear Keelan Moncrief, because she's savvy enough, obviously, they all are. They're like, they know how the bread gets buttered, probably at some level. Even though Keelan Moncrief began the point about what we were sold is full of shit, the fact that Melanie Murphy's gone off on it, you can see that Moncrief seems to kind of go more, yeah, as in like, I'm sensing a level of discomfort. Like, because I'm sensing a thing of like, yeah, we could go off and just go buck wild here for like 5 minutes and really drill down into like how bullshit it is. But you can hear Moncrief sort of potentially, I'm speculating, potentially sort of being like, oh yeah, I don't want to like respond to you too much. You know, I'm just going to kind of go, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Melanie Murphy is kind of starting to dance around it a bit more, sort of, you know, just kind of stuck for words, but trying to make the points, getting a bit uncomfortable with it. And just notice how the conversation just takes a sort of like an abrupt detour, mutually almost silently agreed abrupt detour. Whereas there was so much left on the table actually to discuss. It's like they were finally really getting onto something there. But alas, hear out what I mean there, just as this portion
do
comes to a
like all
close.
this childcare and house stuff and all at the same time, but we are and have been expected to like do so much that and we've been like, oh, but yeah, we can do it, but like no, and acknowledging that and saying that, look, it's okay if you need a bit of a fucking break to just, you know, because at least now I think motherhood and like a mother's work is being acknowledged as work, and that's been a huge shift, because when I was a kid I do feel like women were kind of invisible after a certain age and with kids, and I'm approaching that point now and I'm just like, no, like I don't want to just be seen as just this, oh, you're just a mom and you're just, you know, you're on the mom shelf now and you're, you know, in your late 30s and that's, you know, you just go and do that and shut up about it and just get on with it. And it's just lovely that like people are talking about this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because literally like mothers are unbelievable. Do you ever be out just on a walk and you just see someone with a buggy? You have this side.
See the way it just got uncomfortable there, and she was like, because mothers are great, like, you know, when you're on a walk. And it was like, oh yeah, okay, let's move on. Someone could say I'm like mind reading or, you know, whatever, but I think it's, if you listen to that back, let's say, you can totally hear that for a moment they had both had a little simpatico moment where it was like, you know, this is great. And they were really onto a key cultural point there. And these are cultural insiders. These are online influencer within their demographic and all that, superstars. You know, people, a lot of women of that rough kind of age love listening to these. And they admire them. They follow their lifestyles when they wake up in the morning and make their breakfast and post about it online. They're following it all, you know. So they see these people as like, what's the word? Friend simulators, you know. So that's a big deal. That, to me anyway, that for a moment there, they were almost accidentally veering onto something of real substance. And it sounded like they both knew to sort of leave it there, you know, kind of thing. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know. And then there was another one. So this is Louise McSherry, and I'll get the timestamp. So it's just kind of interesting. 1325. Bear with.
Just trying to explain that. It's so difficult. Like it's really overwhelming, I think.
Lads, that's the same fucking one.
Something's always of mother, and we work there seem to have worn working class relations that previous generations had. You know, had that previous generation you would be at home. Previous generation really helped escape home. You would be at home. That previous generations had, like even my mother-in-law would talk about how, you know, so you know people be at home, so you would be at home.
I apologize.
Like,
I apologize.
You know, our lives where we have careers and we have, you know, you find that difficult. Yeah, I think it's huge and leaking and sore and your hair is falling out and then your body's changing even more as the day goes on. So do you find that, you know, the finding yourself after you gave birth, not just physically, but maybe mentally and emotionally reconnecting with yourself? Did you find that difficult?
Yeah, I think it took me a really long time. I think I'm still doing it. I think I don't know if it ever ends, because especially as modern women, in like, you know, our lives where we have careers and we have, you know, social lives that we want to continue. And, you know, once upon a time, things were socially really different. Like once upon a time, women didn't work. So you would be at home, you know, people lived in communities where they knew all of their neighbors. Usually they lived alongside their family members. Like that's not the situation anymore. Most people can't afford to live near their family anymore. You know, we don't have the same kind of neighbor relations that previous generations had. Like even my mother-in-law would talk about how, you know, all the moms would just sit in their front gardens and have a
chat and the kids play on the road. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's just not a thing.
that sounds ideal.
Yeah. And I'm not
That sounds ideal, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, what happened, lads? You know, that's the problem. What happened? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to have a conversation? Because, of course, that conversation might quickly get you in some trouble. Whereas it's just taken as a given. They're touching on the point. They're nailing it on the head there. But there can be no discussion of like, well, if that was seen as sort of normal among basically your mam, so let's rewind the clock 30, 40 years maximum, perhaps even less. And it was like that. Now it's just like sort of a dystopian opposite to that. I mean, did that just happen magically or whatever? Like, or was it policy? And is it something that we should undo? So someone like McSherry and probably Moncrief as well would be all basically sing the praises of the latest thing, the latest progressive win or whatever it is, sing off that hymn sheet. And yet when they're actually discussing things, they lament the loss of effectively traditional life is what they're talking about there. I mean, local community, generally women, and by the way, 40, 50s, any time in history, women always did jobs, loads of jobs. They had paid jobs, they did all sorts of stuff. But generally the emphasis was on making it so that, well, if they wanted to, they can sort of be, basically the idea of being at home was emphasized, sort of subsidized or promoted or protected in some way, right? And then that was all stripped away and the policies were turned like 100 miles an hour in the other direction. And that was a policy thing, a policy that these kind of, whatever they are, liberals or right on latest thing people promoted all the way. So it's just like, I'm not even like being like thumbing my nose about it. It's just like, just have the consistency to listen to what you're saying and then listen to what you promote in terms of ideology or cultural and political commentary. You know, it's totally contradictory.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist anywhere,
yeah.
but I think it actually exists more in working class communities who seem to have really held on to that sense of community spirit more than other people, which is a real shame, I think. But yeah, like I think that because things have changed so much,
why did things change so much? Things don't just change, you know what I mean? They were changed, right? They were changed. That was all done, and you can easily point to like 5 or 6 different key points of what was changed to make it go from what it was to what it is now, right? And all of those things were super cool, promoted, and you can't criticize them or else you're far right, you're this, you're that. That's what happened. And I just find it funny that they are starting to,
we are kind of a new type of mother, and we have been told obviously that we can have it all, and you need to figure out what that looks like and whether you.
And they're even acknowledging even a point like that. And Luz McSherry, it's funny because she'd go on the radio and say, sort of promote progressivism or whatever that's called. But then at the other hand, she'd say we're told. So like there's a cultural sort of mothership that no pun intended, that tells us stuff. And it's like, well, who tells us? Like, because a lot of people say different things, but we are told that this is how it is. And yet you're also pointing out that that doesn't work. So we're told it and it doesn't work. So what's actually going on? Let's have a conversation. The problem is these conversations can't get off the ground. They're not allowed to do
it, or what balance looks like for you. And, you know, I never feel like I'm hitting all.
Yeah. So yeah, whatever. But it's, what I find interesting about that, right, is that you have the sort of Sex in the City, because people say, oh, this goes back to whatever, the, what's it called, suffrage, you know, if you're really hardcore, or if you want to say, oh, it was the 60s, it was this and that, it was second wave feminism, it was Gloria Steinem and all the rest. Take your pick your point on the timeline. But to me, the point at where it became mass culture was post 2000, sort of somewhere there. Excuse me. There we go. It was somewhere there where in my living, I'm 33 right now, right? And I can remember, I've said this before, but I can remember being 7 years old or something like that. and hearing my mother and other mothers talking and chatting away, and they were saying, yeah, some people send their kids to creche. Like there's these two doctors, they're very high up, very fancy, you know, high flying jobs, and they send their kids into creche and they have a carer and the whole lot. But I don't know, I think it's very weird. I wouldn't be into that. Like it was some newfangled kind of thing. And it was very easy to criticize. And that was basically the hegemonic view, was to be like skeptical and critical of this new thing that was coming, and that was in a minority position. I have that in my life, and most of my friends, and certainly not me, we weren't being shuttled around to after school care and before school care and creche from the age of 7 months old. None of that, right? So that was not normal, even in my childhood. So that came in definitely. Like whenever that started to become like the dominant thing, I was like 18 or 15 or something at that point. I was clear. But that's how quickly, and whereas now, now that I'm a parent, I know this, that if you don't send your kid to creche, for example, my kid is like, what's he now? My older kid, I mean. Because obviously that's relevant. Like he's 2, I'm like forgetting, 2.5-ish. Let's just say 2.5, somewhere in the months. He's like 2.5, and he has never done a day of creche of any sort in his whole life, right? Obviously, nor is my younger daughter. And what I find is that if you're chatting to some parent, if you're in some play group or wherever, social thing or whatever, and they say, oh, how's creche going? Or which creche is he going to? Or like some sort of kid. I don't even know. That's how alien it. I don't even know what they do, really, to be honest. It kind of goes over my head. My eyes glaze over. But it's asked as a assumption. It's not do they. It's you know, about the details of it. And when you go, oh, they're not going, you almost feel like making up an excuse or changing the subject, because there's this thing of, it's like if you didn't get vaccinated or something. It's like they're not going to attack you, but there'll be this awkward feeling. It's like, well, have I criticized? It's like they're self-conscious or something like that. And there's this weird, yeah, it's just seen as like, it's almost like if you're a homeschooler, let's say if you homeschool your kids, and they look at you like you're like gearing up for Waco, or you're some sort of, yeah, Jim Jones cult or something like that. You know, there's just all these assumptions piled on, or discomfort or strangeness to the different thing, and maybe a certain amount of insecurity. You get that now if your kid is over a year old and they're not in some industrial creche, which I find mad. It went from basically the norm was one way to, it was like almost taboo and sort of strange in my childhood, to now, as my children are here, 25 odd years later, it's completely flipped. So that's like a social revolution, top down, but like over the course of just like a micro generation or whatever you want to call it. Let's say a generation. Yeah, it's a generation. But that all happened along with this changing of tax systems, and basically once you'd reach a critical mass of a certain amount of women had gone into work full-time, like office work or whatever, then you bring in hundreds of thousands of immigrants and pump up the numbers. You get to a point where now it's not something where if the second person in the home goes to work, you have extra cool shiny stuff. It's that if you want to have the basics, now everyone has to do it. So it's changed to that, and so it becomes the necessary for everyone to do, and you don't get shiny things for it. You just get the bare minimum of what was normal on one income 30 years ago, you know, that type of thing. So the economics were adjusted, and it didn't just happen. They were intentionally adjusted in that way. And at the same time, Sex and the City was on whenever that aired, that kind of stuff, and all the, you know, that was integrated into HR language and the rest. But let's just call the cultural side of it the Sex and the City thing. The idea that, like, you know, let's say if a girl is watching Sex and the City back in the day, like a younger woman or whatever, and she sees the likes of that and says, yeah, imagine just getting married when you're 24 and then just being like a housewife. Like, it would be like everything would be in black and white, and it would be hell. And I wouldn't be, when people ask me what I do, I wouldn't be able to say I'm a chief advisor to whatever, or I'm a this or that, or these things are amazing, or I'm a journalist and I write articles and all this. You know, it would be low grade. That all came in, and also just there's the experience, there's the mimosas, there's the literal like sleeping around, there's, you know, all that stuff glamorized. And that'll all be wonderful. And with that, you will have a cool, you know, like the apartment, if you've ever seen Ghost, like where Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze live in, I assume it's New York. It's a big lofty apartment in the city, you know, and it's cool. You have a little cello in the corner, and you know, you play music on an old record player, and it's spacious, and you friends over for drinks, and you know, it's wonderful, right? You know, no kids. Maybe have one designer kid when you're ready and wear dungarees and be all cool. And paint the wall like in the AIB ad and splash the paint on each other. It'll be wonderful, but it'll involve minimal kids or probably no kids. But that's great. That's the life for me. And then maybe when I'm like 40, I'll think about having a kid. That's ages away. I'm only 26 or whatever. That was sold. And what I find funny about this, not to just bleed on about it, but is that when you listen to the likes of this, I'll put the screen back up in a sec, but when you listen to the likes of Louise McSherry, Keelan Moncrief, and Melanie Murphy, right? But just by the way, I see a couple of super chats coming in. I never mentioned that at the start. If you'd like to super chat, we can have a chat back and forth. Me and you comment. I'll read your super chats and go through them. I like to enjoy doing that at the end anyway. Feel free. Most of you know already. And you can support the channel in the link in the description on YouTube and on the bio on Twitter. And you can follow me in the rest of it as well. Help keep me going, help me do these. So anyway, plug over. The funny thing about this is, given all that Sex and the City background, that was the lore, the myth that was sold, right? Is that, well, I need to set this point up because I think it's a good point, which is that the likes of these three, McSherry, what's her name, Melanie Murphy, Keelan Moncrief, they're sort of complaining, and justifiably so, about the alienating and difficult nature of trying to raise a child in the modern world as it is, like of the recent past. And how only a generation ago, all the mums were sitting out the front, chilling out and raising the kids and supporting each other, and things weren't so expensive and crazy, and we didn't have to be in these jobs, you know. They're saying that. And like I say, it's justifiably so. Now, bear in mind that they have all those pressures and that alienation. But on the other side of it, let's say it's Keelan Moncrief. The upshot to all this is that you're Keelan Moncrief, right? You are this girls of your, or women of your age, like adore you. They think they listen to what you say. They watch all your videos. You have brand sponsorships, which brings money, clout. You're going into Dublin, and this is true for any of the three I've mentioned there. You're in Dublin meeting with publishers, brands. You're going to some band in town. And again, this is when you can get someone to look after your kid, which is still hard for them, or any support of any kind. But you still have this cool, at least on the face of it, existence where you work within a brand structure or whatever, but in a sense you work for yourself. You have a certain amount of creative freedom, and you do your own podcast and you do your own videos, or you go into the radio station, you broadcast away, and all these normies in their cars, you know, going from back and forth listening to you. You know, how cool is that? And Melanie Murphy, she's like a home family kind of vlogger person. So it's like, on the surface, it's cool. You get invited to things. You get to go to the Goss Awards, to the this, to the that. Even though you might not have so much community around you and the country has changed, if you're one of these people, you will have sycophants all around the place, which in one sense is negative. It makes you feel weird about people, but at least there are people knocking on your proverbial door, online, on your phone, whatever, wanting to say, hey, we're going for a big dinner in Fallon and Byrne, and then we're going to go out to this gig and hang out, and we'd love if you'd be there, you know, because you're you. There are like people who want her there to say, oh yeah, I've kind of been chatting away. I was actually had a coffee with Keelan Moncrief or Melanie Murphy. There would be so many people who want to hang on and know you and the rest of it. And then there's money comes with the whole thing, and experiences and all that. There's this rich lifestyle where it's great in one sense. So even you are struggling with it, and yet you've all these benefits. Now take all the things you're struggling with and are affected by this rapid change in our society. But now you're not Keelan Moncrief, you're not Melanie Murphy or Louise McSherry. You are Niamh O'Leary, and you make people chicken fillet rolls and mace, and you have a kid or two, right? or you work for AXA on the phones, right? There's nothing cool about it. There's nothing changes about it. There's nothing exciting about it. No one wants to meet you and talk to you, comment sections and all this kind of cool stuff being an influencer. None of that, none of the prestige or the extra money. You were just making chicken fillet rolls or filing spreadsheets for AXA, but you have all the same things you're complaining about. And that's the trouble I almost have with some of these influencers, is that I'm glad that they're getting onto it and they're sort of accidentally hitting on the right points, almost dangerously veering onto them. But I wonder if they stop to think, if this affects me so much and I'm meant to relate to my audience and be relatable like a virtual friend, I wonder, do they ever sort of cross because they meet up largely probably with other people who are sort of like them, like attracts alike. So other cosmopolitan sort of people a little bit here and there. But like, and I know they live in the real world, but what I'm saying is I wonder how much do they think about the person doing the woman doing the chicken fillet rolls or the AXA spreadsheets, day in, day out, prick boss, hard work, nothing ever changes. You go back and forth, plus you're alienated, plus you're two salaries with your husband, which you barely ever see him, barely ever see the kids. You're paying for all these ridiculous childcare things. The money is just shrinking in front of you, where you're almost kind of going, can I pay for heating? Can I keep my car going? And you're like, two of us are in these jobs. What's going on? Plus, you're not the influencer, right? And you don't have this cool life, as I aforementioned, or as I said. The irony of it is, to me, about hearing that, is that to tie those things together, it was all sold on the Sex and the City, the Carrie Bradshaw, right? You know, think of the music at the start in the credits, and she's in New York. She's not in, oh, here's another example, just to rewind slightly. So instead of being in Dublin or somewhere cool like that, or going to all these award shows or glitzy kind of little invite things, you know, basically people wanting you, you live in an estate across from a commercial retail park on the outskirts of Athlone. So like I said, the tightened economic margins, and also you're living on a sort of a shitty Celtic Tiger new build estate that you had to pay a fortune for on the outskirts of Athlone, and the neighbors on each side are Pakistani, and they're not Pakistani they're not like the Pakistani whose name is Miles, and he's doing a really cool store up in Trinity, right? It's not that Pakistani. And he's great on the trombone. He's playing a gig later and he's got an installation over here in Rathmines. It's not that guy. It's the Pakistani. They basically don't speak English. They don't really talk to you, look at you so much. They're in their own culture. They don't really have any interest in you at all. They have their own thing, and the big crowds coming and going, and you're sort of like, oh God. And the few Irish that are there, they're all busy anyway, back and forth to super childcare or whatever all day long. And they're shitty jobs, same way you are. So build all that in. So let me get back to the Carrie Bradshaw comparison, right? Sex and the City was, the music starts and the bus goes by and her face is on it, right? And I'm sure that Melanie Murphy Kill Moncrief, every now and again, they might not go past a billboard of themselves, but maybe Louise McSherry would, because she's on radio. But every now and again, they see their own cultural importance and likeness reflected back at them. Someone recognizes them on the street and says, oh, I'm such a big fan, I love you, whatever. And then, or they hear a little, it comes back to them because they're at that scale, let's say, right? So it's the equivalent of the bus goes by Carrie Bradshaw with her face and her name on it. And she's like walking across town in her cool, fashionable clothes. And then what does Carrie Bradshaw do in the show? She has this interesting life, and she is on her laptop tapping away, and she sort of taps away about her daily experiences, and she narrates it out loud for the show, but she's tapping away into her cool laptop. And because she's got she works with the newspaper or whatever, this was before the online times, everybody wants to know what she has to say. So she had she had a date with a guy, and she had this and that happen, and she sort of works it into an overall narrative about how that affects her life and about society and about culture and, you know, the human experience in the city or whatever. And all she has to do, because she is blessed in some way with this extra spark above the normie, she is this big shot and everybody listens to her. And so she gets to do that as opposed to cutting up chicken fillet rolls or filing spreadsheets. she is the archetypical best case scenario. She is the role model, right? So you're watching that. A critic back then could have said, see, this is promoting all this to people. And in reality, they can't all be Carrie Bradshaw. They can't all be the one who everybody, like famous, basically. They can't all be like that. And it's selling a false thing by saying, basically, where this whole, call it feminist or whatever, cosmopolitan lifestyle of like a working woman not held down by family and all this, they're selling it on the vanishingly exceptional case. And in reality, this won't work for the masses who just have to do normal lives. That would have been the critique. But the irony here is that if you fast forward, 20 odd years, and take the Dublin version of it, what are Keelan Moncrief, Melanie Murphy, and Louise McSherry but a sort of an Irish manifestation, online or whatever, but a manifestation, almost like an exact replica of the archetype of a Carrie Bradshaw. I mean, you're adored by people in your demographic, you're known, you're a cosmopolitan and all that kind of stuff. You're invited to things. Carrie Bradshaw would be say, oh, I'm going to a signing, or I'm going to this and that. And you watch it and you think, oh, imagine if I had such an interesting lifestyle like that, not being in a kitchen, chained to a stove. But the irony is that these people are like, it's not an exaggeration to say that, yeah, it's basically the Dublin modern Irish, let's say, adjusted for Irish equivalent of, like, they're all like sort of versions of a Carrie Bradshaw, basically. They're the exaggerated archetype in real life. And even they are speaking to each other publicly and saying, yeah, this shit isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's like Carrie Bradshaw, the character herself, jumped out of the television, fast forward 25 years and said, actually, yeah, no, this doesn't work. And so if it doesn't work for Carrie Bradshaw, then how can it work for Louise Murphy, working on the Deli and Mace on the outskirts of Athlone? Think of how much worse it is for her, and think of how much it deserves social and cultural analysis in the face of taboos, right? Regardless of those. The cost to people's lives, is unreal. So I'm just checking the chat, and yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to build to with, like, from Tom McDonald to Keelan Moncrief. There's actually a huge continuity in there, and it comes down to the, sorry, I'm going to sneeze. It went away. One of those. But there's a continuity between Tom McDonald and Keelan Moncrief, and everything in between. There's a sort of a link there that touches on this demographic question of, like, okay, if the whole world's population gradually is going to go below replacement as is, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to reorder society to gradually taper in and wait for something to happen? Or maybe nothing ever happens, but we just kind of reorient society gradually. Nothing will happen overnight. It's going to be no shock overnight, but just gradually reorient as such. Are we going to bring in 5 million Africans and all have to pay $2,000 in rent and be totally, like, alienated culturally, and culture wars and civil unrest and disaster, right? Or are we going to promote, basically take the middle ground, which is, don't go down the immigration road, because it doesn't make any sense. Promote positive levels of fertility, which will hopefully get us over replacement. But even if that's not enough, then we just deal with the fallout gradually and just reorient the society as we go. That's clear. That, to me, that's the answer. There's a conversation there, and of course that would involve changing everything. Intergenerational families becoming more of a thing, getting back to your people, the changing in the work lifestyle, the whole 2 people need to be at work, that would all have to change one way or another. It would bleed all the way out to foreign vulture funds owning everything in Ireland and renting it back to us, basically. Everything would have to change. It would be a holistic thing. Everything, and it wouldn't have to change overnight, but over time, if you just set the demographic question right, like, or at least the solution to it right, took the most sensible solution and let it play out, you would then have to change everything else to conform to that, and all those changes would ultimately be for the best. And that would span from Keelan Moncrief to Tom McDonald. It doesn't actually have a partisan quality to it, really. It's just got a, are you controlled by the regime or are you like some sort of dissident? That's the only difference. I did notice, I don't mean to like insult these influencer women here who I've been talking about, but you know, I did see that, let's say that podcast is for the Joe Media Group, you know, Joe.ie, Joe.uk and all that. And they are owned by Greencastle Capital, who are owned by Linton Capital. So my point is, like, a lot of these people will be like, capitalism really oppresses us and la la la. And then when they get onto the edgy point, they'll run away from it a little bit. But it's like, well, it's no surprise. Yeah, like all the brand deals and all this stuff all flows up to these capital conglomerations and the rest. So like, you know, put it this way. If any three of these women I mentioned one day just woke up, they didn't go like far right crazy or total taboo subjects or any of this kind of stuff. But they just said, do you know what? I'm not going to caveat myself. I'm not going to hem and haw when I sort of arrive at a certain point. I'm just going to say things as they are, as I see it. It wouldn't, the trouble would arrive at their door pretty quickly from their brand sponsors and the rest of it, right? They would like, and you can hear that they're at some level conscious of that. But so that's what it is. It's only, that's the only, it's not a partisan political line to me. Like when I look at a lefty, it's someone like I've forgotten his name, that TikToker recently. I can't think of his name. I talked about him a few videos ago. Sorry, lads. Too many names in play here, but he was a lefty TikToker who was acknowledging that immigration is kind of out of control, you know, and crazy. But you know, the only line between someone like him and someone like me is there's no real fundamental issue really as to why we couldn't at least discuss the differences and similarities. It's just like, you know, I and others like me are demonized and blacklisted out of society, and if you kind of stay within the lines and you're someone people would like to listen to, you maybe could have good gigs and stuff like that and you're secure. That's sort of the that's the difference. That's what we're all shackled down by, really. So I'm not saying that these three women agree, or we could all be in harmony and agree with each other and stuff. Not necessarily, but there could be much more concord across the board between everyone and sense making happen and really speaking truth to power, but for these issues. And I don't know how we get around it, but I just thought that was interesting anyway. So maybe I'll leave that. I was going to talk about Clonmel a little bit. I mean, this is the main subject for tonight. But will I do a bit of Clonmel? 1, if I should do Clonmel. 2, if I should wrap it up. Put it that way. It won't be a big Clonmel thing, but it'll be a bit. Yeah. So, any crack, lads? How are you getting on? I just thought all that stuff was interesting. I feel like I always, when I ramble about these things, it's like I pull up a bunch of tabs. I've had a couple of thoughts on my mind throughout the day. And so there's no big preparation. There's no big speech written. There's no huge amount of bullet points. And the ideas are probably like 75% formulated. And then they get developed a bit as I talk. And I always feel like as I finish it, I think if I could go back to the start now and start that again, I would be able to bang it out better. I'd be able to more coherently put it all together. But that's the nature of these streams. See, it's active, it's live, it's sort of, the pot is, you know, the cooking is in session, you know, that kind of way. That's how I look at it. But so I'm seeing ones. Okay, let's just talk briefly about Roscrea. So, or sorry, fucking hell, there's so many of these towns. Clonmel, they're both in Tip. So Clonmel have, you know, been resisting this huge site being opened up. And just in the last few days, the usual, the guards came along, public order unit and all the rest of it. But the wrinkle this time is that it's directly British security. I have videos. I mean, should I watch them? You've seen them already, and I don't even have the good videos. I couldn't even find them. But I mean, let's give you a taste. Just random videos here. Basically, British private security being brought in to man the site, and the guards sort of helping them, being extra muscle for them. And it's totally alien and fucked up, same way Newtown, Mount Kennedy was, and the rest. So it's in a way, it's kind of a repeat of what, you know, there's not that much new, but there's some.
Look behind us.
So,
Look behind us. Peaceful protest.
and up to 6 months imprisonment.
Right.
So yeah, so this policy that basically nobody wants, that is completely, I'll get onto this in a second, is completely to the benefit of multi-millionaires. The worst sort of, like, think of Johnny Ronan, like the worst forms of Johnny Ronan type people, like just pure shark profiteer type people, right? At all levels, names we don't even know about, but just loads of these people. They're all hidden behind these things like Pastures New Limited and Oak, Lovely Oak LLC or whatever. It's all this kind of stuff, and then behind it is some fella in the kind of jeans and the shirt tucked in, and pure just scumbag gone being, just all money, just like these people, you see them on the street and you go, there's some sort of prick, like money obsessed, no amoral scumbag. It's all, you'll always find it's those lads behind it, right? Obviously, or even foreign shareholders and stuff, but basically it's to their benefit, and there's no rules, and it's complete anarchy for them. It's almost it's like a blank check from the government. It's like a subsidy. It's like they're getting the dole, because all they do is put up a couple of prefabs, which they almost outsource to another contractor anyway to do, but they oversee it. They put their name to it. They have to manage the implementation a bit, but it's basically buy a site, fuck a load of prefabs into it. The government will put a load of foreigners in. Then you get a bunch of other sort of low class, like low working class, whatever you want to call it, like underclass foreigners to man and staff it, security, catering, whatever. The people in there are sort of scrimped on, and the whole community that is forced to have to take this, effectively like a barracks within their community, is ignored and beaten down and pepper sprayed, and the lads laugh all the way to the bank, and then this sort of mass scale government agenda is fulfilled that nobody asks for, everybody opposes. Like, there's no world in which this isn't a dirty, filthy, like take that, is it Joni Mitchell or whatever, paid paradise and put up a parking lot, like that old thing of like, oh, imagine the man doing this thing that a whole community is in agreement with, isn't necessary, and it's not even needed. It's the only beneficiary is corruption and power and awfulness. It's not, there's no consensus on this. Everyone's against it. And there's no real argument for it, but unbridled greed, right? And destruction of everything that is good and pure. It's that kind of tier. It's as cartoonishly simplistic as that in reality. And, you have people from the town here sitting down to oppose it. These foreign mercenaries, basically, plus these fat guards, are threatening these people sitting down with 6 months in jail. Meanwhile, as much as I think she's a likable person and she's hitting the mark and all that, just as an example of someone who's somewhat beholden to the regime, you have people like these influencers talking about, oh, I hope I'm not ageist and la 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 and all this. And it's like, you do realize, like, a couple of 100 miles down the road, ordinary people, the people who are cutting the chicken fillet rolls and working in AXA, or they might be on the dole, as some people say, but either way, like non-special people like you who don't have their political talking points sort of preset a little bit. You have to not be ageist, you have to be la la la, politically correct and all this. We're told what to say, I think one of them said. They're all going on about this. Meanwhile, the non-special people, in such a way, looking at it, are being threatened with 6 months in jail, are being pepper sprayed and arrested all over the place and brutalized for just defending their community. And there's like just silence. You know what I mean? I'm talking about it. People online are talking about it, but it's just like, it's not happening. Like, all these influencers are talking about stuff and it's great, but it's like, it's not happening. Like, if one of them said, imagine if on one of those podcasts, one of them said, like, let's say the conversation veered that way, somehow it veered that way. And they said, I did see what's happening. And I do have to say, I'm not racist and I support people and I love everyone. But at the same time, like, I saw what happened in Newtown, Mount Kennedy and Clonmel. I did see that online and it's so wrong what's happening. What do you think, guys? Game over. I mean, gone, right? So it's like, that's kind of what you're dealing with. But anyway, I'll stick to Clonmel. It's just a few more videos to set I'll like give my spiel maybe on it. But
look after the Irish people, try to fix what has always been broken.
By the way, I was down in Clonmel a few weeks ago and I was chatting to this fella. I didn't get his name at the time. I know he has he's on TikTok. He's around the place. He's great, but I just can't put the name to the voice or the face right now. But here he is just
It'll be going on. Maybe if they put the money into the broken hospital, the fact there's no ambulances, the fact there's no fire brigades.
All the poor on the town.
Yeah. Home, the Irish homeless looked after the Irish people, tried to fix what has always been broken. It has always been broken in this country, and they've never had to fix what was already broken. Where are they pulling the millions out of for all this?
Yeah.
Where's the money? Where's the money when you look for your overtime? Where's the money when you're trying to pay your ESB bills, trying to pay for your fuel for your houses? All of this is coming out of your pockets, guys, whether you like it or not. The high taxes, the high mortgage interest, all of that is going to...
By the way, you can correct me. I don't know. I haven't done the maths on this one, right? But as you mentioned, home heating or fuel or whatever, if you were to I wonder if you were to take the 2 billion, call it 3 billion, 4 billion, whatever, it depends how you slice it, several billion euro, and then break it down per household in Ireland. Or per household, let's say not because B or A rated houses kind of heat themselves or whatever, but let's say you crack down the amount of houses that have a kerosene oil tank or something like that, and you break down how much of every household's home heating bill would be paid by that. Maybe I'm totally missing the mark here because I haven't calculated it, but I'd say you wouldn't be far off something like if there were no asylum seekers being brought in, which people don't want anyway. Basically, no one would have to pay for it. That would just be for, there's mad shit like that. There's loads of creative ways you can break down that number because it's so huge. And when you get the answer back, divide 2 billion by whatever, you kind of go, holy shit, that's a lot of money.
To pay for these sites. They can't put the money into the services that are broken.
The rich get poor, the poor get poor.
The rich get richer and the poor die trying. The Irish are dying on the streets.
By the way, just look at those scumbags. Look, they're even dressed that way. They're just dressed like thug mercenaries. And I see the same faces around.
The Irish are dying waiting for ambulances. The Irish are dying waiting for hospital services on trolleys in the hospitals. And yet now they have all the millions and billions for visitors that are being invited here by Roderick O'Gorman since 2018. Who gave that man the right to invite people to this country in the middle of a housing crisis? Who gave that man permission to put it in so many different languages to countries that weren't at war? Is this going to be every community in Ireland? Because we know we've got plenty of protests set up all around the country. We know we've had the people attacked in Newtown, Mount Kennedy by lads protest. They were still pepper spraying people in their own front gardens. And you tell me the country's not gone wrong?
Yeah, all very well said. One of the things, if you said to a politician, there's so much of a suppression of conversation in this country. We're within our own bubble. We all talk about it, but of course it's a bubble. Really, they make it so. They make it that way. But among the mass population, why shouldn't people be allowed to say to Roderick O'Gorman or the rest of it, just to anyone, say, where does it end? Let's say we take all these people that you're building centres for now. Let's say we leave Clonmel and everybody goes home and just lets this one happen, no problem. If you ask the government, what's the end point? They'll be like, oh, we're building super complexes in the of Thornton Hall to take God knows how many thousands of people who will just be processed across the rest of the country. And then, of course, once the 6 are built or whatever, there'll be another 6 built. What are we talking here? And of course, one of the answers they'll give is that, if they're being honest, they'll be like, oh, well, the vision is to build a city-state, a big, massive Singapore. But, we can all see as it's playing out so far that, yeah, we'll get the population density of you'll give us a Tokyo population density from east to west or whatever, or some huge population density. But you'll discriminate against Irish people effectively. Irish people will always be the bad guy, even when we're 10% of the population. You won't do anything for us. Everything will be about services and supports for foreign communities, and everything will be a community but the Irish community. We can't be a community, or you're far right. And in reality, we won't have monorail and subways and all this kind of stuff. It won't actually be like Singapore. It'll just be like a shitty hellhole, like dystopian. I could say third world, but at least if you go to Uganda, there's a bit of crack there. There's a bit of life. They have their cult. Everyone's basically Ugandan, and they might be poor, but there's a good vibe. There's a good atmosphere. There, people don't go around depressed and stressed and stuff. There's effectively like a culture. So it's like it'll be worse than that. It'll be like a degraded, like awful post-Soviet but worse again version of Ireland, destroyed, hell to live in, uglier and uglier, public infrastructure getting uglier and crumbling, and like, you know, instead of waiting 2 days to be seen in the A&E, it'll be 4 days, or you just don't even bother. It'll get like third world countries where you just don't bother, and you just kind of die alone, all that kind of stuff, or die getting punched by some random person in the old folks home, with the family, absent the family that you never had. But there'll be no subways. There'll be no cool infrastructure. There'll be no, you can't spit on the street. It's perfectly clean. It's like Dubai or you know, Shanghai or Singapore. It won't be any of that. So that's I'm kind of answering my question, is that it'll just keep going indefinitely, exploiting everyone, migrants and Irish alike, to their last, like ants, and deculturalizing everyone. And it'll just go on, you know, ad infinitum. And that's what it is. It's not, oh, just let this center happen because we have to put some asylum. No, this is on a continuity of the whole bigger picture. And you have these thug, you know, scumbags here who are kind of grinning to each other, with like an entirely foreign imported security team, because of course you get to the point where Irish security won't and don't want to do it. So you're literally employing, that's why I said in my title, black and tans, right? Largely English and other nationalities, hired in to be enforcers for a migrant plantation garrison. That's exactly what happened in Ulster hundreds of years ago. It's the black and tans analogy is not an exaggeration. I'll talk more about that in just a second.
Is this wrong?
So yeah, that's okay. So that's that. Any more videos? Just a few random bits and pieces. Gardaí physically removing protesters. More of those lads. This video doesn't seem to have any audio, apparently. Okay, so this one, Mick O'Keefe. I thought this one was good. This is a lad who I may or may not be. You know, I don't know who it, because I think I know who it is speaking. But it's very. This will lighten the mood slightly. Brief bit of comic relief, sort of. It's this one of these foreign workers who intentionally, you know, there's a lot of consternation there. One of these lads who could have smoked a fag anywhere on the building site, right? He comes out to smoke a cigarette, intentionally goes across the outside of the complex to join the, kind of sit around where the protesters are, which is a provocative thing given everything that's happening, and decides, oh, I don't have to smoke. I'm going to smoke outside, standing here. And he has like 3 guards sort of protecting him. 3 guards who don't want to show their faces. They're so ashamed and weak looking. And he sits there sort of smirking at the protesters who were like, listen, you're effectively provoking us by coming out here blowing smoke in our faces, really. But the lad here speaks to him very, it's very funny. What he does say to him. Like, he cuts down your aunt's cockiness pretty well.
What's your names? On your hat on. No, nothing. None of you guys are going to let him come over and instigate like that. Lads, are you going to let him come instigate like that, lads? Lads, excuse me, lads. Lads, sorry, are you going to let him instigate us like that? Turn your hat, lads. This is scandalous. Right, what would you do anyway? I don't think you do that, and I think you're a windy little fool. I'd slap you up and down the road in 2 minutes, I said. It's not threatening behaviour. I think. That's what I reckon. What do you think?
I love that. As in, he says, the fact that he said, I'd slap you up and down the road, I condemn all illegal activity, obviously. Of course, because he said when he was accused of threatening behaviour, he said, no, I think. I'm not saying I'd do that. I think I would. Which is very fun. I just thought that was an amusing turn of phrase. And then, like something out of a movie, stares your man in the face and says, that's what I reckon. What do you think? Epic.
That's what I reckon. What do you think?
He looks like he's smoking a joint, yeah.
He does.
Yeah. So why would you go out and sort of, like, if I were a hostile invader, basically, like a contracted out by a totalitarian state ruling over like its own people, you know, if I did that, let's say I did it for the money and I didn't quite know what I was getting in for, but I got there, I certainly would be keeping my head down and just getting it done and getting out of there if I were to follow through with it. The fact that what is going on with this guy's head, that he thinks, I'm going to come over and just smirk at them in their faces. Horrible bastard, in my opinion. So that's what's been going on there. By the way, I couldn't find, there's certain videos I couldn't actually find it was a Phil Dwyer clip I had seen on Telegram, but I couldn't find it, where basically the story is the security guards, who were, as far as I know, like all foreign, largely English, which, I mean, come on, you know, like putting English security guards contracted in to a foreigner plantation garrison, like, come on, like, but and it also just goes to show how serious it is, where they can't actually get Irish workers anymore. They have to literally bring in foreign mercenary workers, effectively, to build these fucking monstrosities. But the thing is, the video I wanted to play was Phil Dwyer excellently pointing out, as many people have, that none of these security people have PSA license badges, which, if you're a security guard in Ireland, the standard thing is you have to have your badge on your arm. And if someone says, hey, can I see your ID or whatever, you know, identify yourself as a security guard. There's lots of reasons for that, but ultimately it's just the law. Like, and we've seen that many times. When Phil was down, it's always Phil, but when Phil was down in Clare, in whatever it was called, there was a site there a while back, or when he was at the Wicklow, this stuff is surreal, when he was at the Wicklow military barracks, and he tried to approach the place, and no soldiers came down to him. They came after, but the first person he was approached by was this random foreigner in plain, like Romanian looking type of fella, in plain clothes. And when Phil said, who are you? The guy was blocking him from going any further. And he said, I'm God the angel, right? And then just didn't say anything else, pretended not to speak any more English. You know, this is one of the reasons or sorry, not Phil, but this is one of the reasons PSA badges, I suppose, exist, is because, for example, in a situation like that, if you got to a random place that didn't necessarily have a you can't enter sign, or you'd gone up to the gate and some random man stopped you, and then when you tried to keep walking, like, put it this way, if I'm walking down the street, right, and I want to go from one street to another street, and then a random man stands in my way and says, no, you can't go any further. Now, I would say, what are you talking about? And he says, no. He just stops and he just says, no, you can't go. And then I go, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of my way. Like, and you go by him, and then he stands more in your way, and you keep going, and he's trying to restrain you. You know, you could get into a big, huge punch up, because you're saying, listen, I'm walking down the street, or I'm walking wherever I'm going, and there's a strange man who is either standing in my way. I feel threatened by him blocking me. And either way, I might have to defend myself or be threatened. You know what I mean? There's some strange man who won't communicate with me. Whereas if you're in a shopping center and the person says, hey, this area is closed off, like, you can't go further here, and you say, okay, who are you? And he says, oh, look, I have his jacket. Here's my PSA badge. I'm a security guard. I work for the center. You go, okay, oh, well, I understand now. I'm not being accosted by a strange man, right? I suppose that's one of the, and also, so there's accountability and stuff, so you can, you know, so that you don't get abused, or, you know, the rest of it. But either way, it's the law, as far as we knew. And yet these security guards are just sort of in random different kind of clothes and no badges, and they're just standing around. And so people say, where are their badges? Now, Phil says to the guards, this is the video I don't have, but he says to not just the guards, by the way, a superintendent, which I don't know, is a pretty high-ranking local police officer, big deal type of guard. Phil goes up to one of them, and he says, listen, none of those have PSA badges. Can you explain that to me? Or can you arrest those guys, or whatever, talk about it? And sorry, I keep wanting to sneeze. I have a sneeze in me, and but it's a tough one. It's liminal. Apologies. But Phil says, like, what are you going to do about that? Like, you know, and they just ignore him. They just basically, they like look through him and turn their faces away and the rest of it. And Phil just kind of says, listen, you're on record now. You know, you're not enforcing this. You're not doing anything. You're not answering my question. And what's mad about it is, if we're to assume that they're breaking the law, then the guards are just kind of, it's the equivalent to this, right? If I say, like, because they could say, oh, well, they say something like, contact the press office or something like that, right? But it'd be like if you across a road on the street, there was a woman actively being burgled, but he was tugging at her handbag, taking it away from her. And you said to a guard, can you look across the street there? There's a man mugging a woman. And he looks over, he does see it. And then he just looks at you and you go, are you going to do something about it? And he just sort of says, just has his head down. Like, you'd be kind of going, what are your orders here? What have you been ordered to not enforce that, or what's going on? Like, I'm telling you now, like, what's going on? And that's kind of what's happening. It's like, yeah, they're not showing their badges. The public expect that's, as far as we're aware, the law. So, like, could you please, as a public servant, address either the situation that's going on or address our concerns? And the guard just kind of looks with contempt at Phil and the rest of everybody, asking them about that. It's an alien. You're in a town. You're thinking, come on, like, this is going on. Like, think of the way they liaise with the black community outreach and all this. Oh, we're going to dance around. We're going to wear turbans for the Sikhs or whatever. It's like, you can't even address the local Irish community who are saying, those lads are all foreign security guards. We are being threatened with 6 months in jail. Nobody in the country, the vast majority of people oppose this. All these security guards are foreign mercenary workers, basically, and none of them have badges, which is what we are led to believe is the law. So, and now I'm saying to you, what's going on there? And the guard just looks through you. Like, think of how much of an abrogation of their duty and then the supposed honor that should come with the role. Think of how much that's abandoned there in just that. And he's on camera. But now there's a further wrinkle to that, which is that there's potentially there's something much to explain. So one of the heads of Mick O'Keefe and others sort of brought this to light, that one of the heads of the security there is a fella called, he's got alias names, but his real name apparently is, I think, Joe Arthur Taylor. He's a Brummie from Birmingham, obviously English, and he is heading up this thing. And in his like LinkedIn or his bio, people went and checked it all. His forte is close protection security and the rest of it, right? Now, I'm not saying he's special forces and the rest of them are, I don't know what they are, right? But point is, you can imagine a lot of private security contractors, which is a very murky world, which someday I'll do a big deep dive on, because people have no idea the shit that goes on. There's ways in which private security can come into the country here and get exceptions to be armed on the street and all sorts of shit, and we don't even know about it all. There's a lot of murky stuff there, sort of almost like an international carte blanche for certain people, you know, exceptions made for favorable. Basically, it's a long story, but what I'm saying is, you know, I don't know what this security firm is, but they do close protection and this kind of VIP stuff. Basically, like, I'm sure it's not like this, but on the face of it, kind of James Bond stuff, you know, that kind of idea. These guys definitely are no James Bonds. But what I'm saying is, it's not the fella outside the shopping center doing security, right? It's something else, right? Whether it's former soldiers, which is kind of, to my point, of black and tans. I don't think you're getting people who claim to be close protection specialists and all this, who are just random Joes who the previous day were like returning trolleys in Tesco's or whatever. You're going to have, for that kind of work, on the CV needs to be a bit of army, a bit of armed protections. That, you know, surely in order for any company to have a bit of prestige, their personnel need to have something on the CV, you know what I mean, to justify that. Which is worrying, which leads to the black and tans comparison, obviously. These Joe Arthur Taylor and whatever the company is, and all these random other people with no badges on. Now, the other thing they're trying to do, which I find infuriating, is to talk to locals through the gates and stuff and say, almost like British soldiers in Kabul trying to make sure the locals don't totally pop off or whatever, where they go, they come down and they say assalamu alaikum and all that, and they, you know, they plumose the locals to try and sort of gain a bit of good graces or whatever. They kind of do that shite with some locals I've seen, where they go, you've shown respect to me, so I'm going to show courtesy to you. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, I'll do my best to find out, and we'll see what we can do. And we want everyone to win here, and all this, all that bullshit. And it's like, it's like they're trying to be, it's like, it's part of their gig. Like, oh, we're going to like manage the situation and all that. But at one point, he's speaking in that fashion to one of the locals through the gate. And he says, she asks him, where are your badges? What's the story? And he mentions in vague detail that, well, because we are VIP protection and not random security guards at a gate, which is what we would come to expect, because we are technically like VIP protection type of stuff, we actually, there's some sort of law where within the EU, which includes Ireland, we don't actually have to have our badge. I have my badge on me. I wish I had this video, but take my word for it, right? You can find it. I have my badge on me in case a guard or police or whatever ask me for it. I could show it to them, but I don't have to show it to anyone the way you would a PSA badge. And nor do any of the other lads, because they're part of the VIP contractor thing, close protection thing, or whatever it is. And so that's the answer to the question. Actually, technically, it is legal, right? Now, for one, I'll sort of take his word for it, right? Because that seems like a logical explanation. Now, why couldn't the superintendent, with all their wearing turbans and bingo bongoing around the place with Africans or whatever, right? Why couldn't they have said to Phil, here's the thing, because clearly they know. Here's the thing. These people are a certain type of security guard. Let me explain what it is. They don't have to show it. La, 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 la. That's the story. You've asked me, I've answered your question. There you go. Out of respect. They wouldn't do that. Now, secondly, I'm still not happy with that. That's not an explanation that I say, oh, well, that's sufficient. That's grand now. That answers that question. We're all good. That's what, how can we, like, I'm just sort of, what's the word? Thunderstruck by that. I almost don't know what to say to it. It's just like, I can't say anything. It's clearly outrageous. That these guys can have no identification, not offer it, and they're part of some effectively shadowy tier of security guard for VIP close protection, and they're at a plantation centre in Clonmel, which is effectively, to my mind, looks like a almost militarized version of security over this centre. And not just that, but they're all foreign. And mostly English. Again, we're back to black and tans. That's what else were black and tans, basically, right? But pretty much that. The other question I would have is, because we don't know about what exactly this tier of, like, I'd like your man to provide all the literature on their licensing, the legality, the EU law, whatever. If he's going to be so forthcoming and liaising with the community, I want to see the fine print of what's going on here. What is this thing, right? Surely that's a basic question to ask from a journalistic point of view. You've given us the short version. What's the long version? What is this? And how is it allowed? And all the different processes between EU law, whatever the hell your company is, and the state signing off on it in some way, and the guards definitely signing off on it, and the rest of it. What's going on? The other question I would have is, potentially, are there people on this site who are armed? Right, private security who have licenses to be armed on the site. Because the way everything else is covered up, the way they don't have badges, the way it's VIP close protection and the rest of it, I think it's fair enough to ask what level of clearance do they have within their own organization or from the guards for potential different escalations. What's the story there? What is your brief? Right, and they could say, well, we can't share that because that's our whole point. We're like a military operation, basically. We can't tell you. But it's like, well, no. I don't think Ireland ever signed off on going from a little bit of civil unrest to do with a policy that nobody wants to now you just have carte blanche to militarize and secretize, or whatever the word is, this whole operation and turn it into the green zone in Baghdad. Okay. So what's going on? Like, talk about public transparency and stuff. What is going on with this organization? Who are they? What are they doing? What do they have licenses for? The rest of it. I mean, I'll be looking into it, but I'm sure you will too. Basically, I would encourage you to do that yourself. Now, one final, I'll leave you with this. So it's a lot of stuff I've spoken about already, but there was a young fella. I'm not good with age, someone could be 22 or they could be 42. Sometimes I don't really know. But to my mind anyway, this fella, I'm 33. I perceive this guy to be a young fella, right? So I don't know how young. But he's a kind of a young fella. And I'll be honest, I was at that protest encampment weeks ago. And I spoke to this fella briefly. And what I got out of him, I hope he doesn't mind me, so I'm not giving away any detail, but he's already very public doing his videos and stuff. From the brief bit I spoke with him, I've been around this stuff for a while and sort of, even I can get jaded by it and all that. The impression I got from him was that he's very idealistic and very passionate about it and takes it all very to heart, right? And it's not that I don't, But it's just, I felt like he had a very strong sense of taking it all personally, right? Which is understandable. Like, I mean, I wish more people kind of would. But my point is, he obviously feels it all very strongly and feels how wrong it is. Let's say I'll leave it at that. And he's talking about it. He's going out sometimes on his own to this thing, like really taking a stride forward on his own to oppose this stuff legally and peacefully. And to my mind, that's, while not knowing this person, to my mind, that should be what a society values. Someone who's a patriot, someone in the face of power, in the face of oppression, in the face of all what there is to lose, feels patriotic ideals about what is just plainly right and proper, and is willing to go against the norm. Where, think of how many people in Clonmel are sitting at home watching Netflix, following it on their phone, going, God, that's totally wrong. That's terrible. But, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm just going to stay here and watch TV and have a shower and go to bed or whatever. It's like it wouldn't occur to them, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to say my piece. I'm going to go up there and join these people. They wouldn't, because they just don't, it doesn't come to them that personally. Whereas the patriotism of actually going out there should be exalted. There's a video I want to find here. There's a detour. Slightly, it's obviously related, but it's a Jonathan Bowden clip, English orator. And it's very, I don't know if I can find it. See, the Twitter search is awful, because I know I posted this and I know I said Jonathan Bowden. But when you put in the key search terms that you had in the tweet, it doesn't show for some reason. Usually, that's my experience. Yeah, as usual, random shit. No, a different old tweet. Raging. It's a clip from Jonathan Bowden about how most people are sort of a little bit. He talks about this stuff and he says that people will support you from afar, but then they'll condemn you, but then they'll secretly be pleased you're doing it, and they'll do all that at the same time, sort of thing, because that's the way people are, I think, is what he says. And it is unfortunately the way people are and the way people have been made. And here you have a young man who cares. No money in it, no millions, no, what is it? Trips to €600, because every hotel costs €500 minimum now, right? Trips to, let's say, €800 hotels to post on Instagram, and then he goes and stays in Fermanagh in the little plastic bubble in between two trees. Probably costs another €600 a night, and sipping champagne and post about it on Instagram to all your other like property developer friends or whatever, right? And it's all like the vapidity of that lifestyle, and they do whatever, they're part of Pastures New Limited or whatever, and it's all good. Like, they're living like ridiculous hedonists, right? Empty hedonists. And then there's this man who's willing to sit out there in the cold all night, or well, it's summer, but out in the nighttime, just because of it's right. And what happens to him? Of course, he gets arrested effectively for nothing.
What's your name, Garda? And your number, if you don't mind. Your name and your number, please. Right.
You know what's going to happen here. He's about to be arrested, right? But for vague non-reasons. But just, I need to make this point so that you're aware of it as you watch. The guard, I spoke about this recently, how people crumble under the pressure of having to do the wrong thing. I don't think this guard is just scared or anything of the physical altercation. When I look at this guard, I see a guard who knows it's wrong, who might even be on the side of being against it. But of course, he's in this position. He's been stationed at the gate, and he's been told, once the next person who moves forward in his earpiece or whatever, he's been told, the next person who moves forward, I expect you, basically, I want you to arrest somebody tonight. Make an example of someone tonight. And so he's sitting there going, well, I either go back to my wife and I say, I've quit, or I have to do this. That's the impression I get off how much this man is shaking, or it's just totally spiritually weak, guardy, pussy, guardy, who are just weak and scared in general. I don't know. But either way, just look at how affected this guard is by what he's doing, which to my mind, if I felt like that about anything, I'd be like, there's no job, there's no anything, I'm not doing it. If it affects me that badly in my conscience in some fashion or other, I don't want to do it, sorry. Whereas, take for example a fella who just like punched an old lady in the nose on the street, you'd have no problem arresting him, putting his hands behind his back, slamming his head off the footpath as you put the cuffs on him. And you wouldn't shake there, right? That wouldn't bother you at all. Do you get what I mean? That's the difference here, is that he knows what he's doing is insane and so wrong. And look, watch him shake.
There we go, look. Yeah. KY 145. What's your name, bud?
What's you?
I'm just wondering. I'm live here now. I'm not causing any trouble. I'm live here.
And what's your name?
I'm live. My name is Stephen.
Stephen.
Doesn't matter.
Stephen.
Doesn't matter.
Right, I'm going to be honest with you, right? The Section 24 of the Criminal Justice
Voice is shaking.
Public Order Act, right? I'm demanding your name and address. If you fail to give it to me,
what have I done wrong?
If you fail to give it to me, you will be arrested. Come here, you're in a public place.
Okay, I'm in a public place, all right? Folks, I'm getting arrested here now for not giving up my details, okay? I'm here fighting for the Irish people. What the fuck is wrong with the rest of you? I'm not going to, I don't have to give you my details, man. I'm standing off the road now because there's a car coming. Wait, look, there's a car coming behind you. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. His hand is on me.
Listen to me.
He's manhandling me.
There's no one manhandling you.
Get your hands off me then.
No one
I can hear you. I can feel you shaking, man. Get your fucking hand off me right now, this second, man.
Right.
I'm not doing. Look, that's two hands.
You're being arrested.
That's two hands. Right, folks, I'm being arrested, yeah? I'm being arrested for practicing my fucking free speech. Get the fuck. Get the fuck. Get the fuck. What do you want? Get the fuck off me. Put your hands behind your fucking back now. Okay, I'll go myself. Yeah? Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest. Can I get my belongings off the ground, please?
We'll get them out.
Peaceful protest. That's okay. Get my stuff off the ground, yeah? Yeah. Ireland for the Irish! You're facilitating an invasion. I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I'll jump in, yeah?
Step in.
Yeah, so some people debated the legality of that arrest. Technically, under the Public Order Act or whatever, which is totally carte blanche for guards, basically. Technically, if I want your name and I want your details, and people say, well, if they want your name, you have to give it to them if they suspect you have committed an offence. And I suppose if you said to them, which I'll keep in mind, what offence do you suspect me of having committed an offence or be about to commit one? And if so, can you state what it is? That might help, right? But regardless, other people say, oh, well, no, if you didn't give us, I don't know the legality, the fine print on that. But I think we can all say for sure, like that arrest didn't need to happen. Obviously he didn't do anything wrong. He's just at a demo, a protest, whatever, camping outside, looking on at this thing. Again, that's it. But I want to give you a comparison on how much of a anarcho-tyranny we have, right? Where this young man who's patriotic, who's basically going up against uncontroversial wrong across the board, and just he has no other outlet, NGO, political media, whatever. He's just speaking out against it at the scene. He gets arrested. He gets cuffs on his back and his face pushed up onto the pavement, right? And meanwhile, you have here, let me just read this to you, right? And this is only one case, and it's not Clonmel, but it's the same idea. There's Ryvale House. There's many examples, but let's just take the one in Kippur. I'm not from Wicklow. There's a situation there which just boggles my mind, right? I'll put it big screen if whatever. So I'm just reading it out to you. So the kind of people I mentioned just a minute ago, these profiteers. So asylum millionaire, state rewarding illegal behavior with multi-million, and this is the last thing I'll talk, this is just one quick thing and then we're done. Asylum millionaire, state rewarding illegal behavior with multi-million euro contracts. A senior member of the Dáil spending watchdog has accused the Department of Integration of rewarding illegal behavior by awarding multi-million euro contracts for asylum accommodation to companies in breach of planning laws. And I'll carry on with a different article about the same subject, just for more details. So all these details are relevant, right? So listen up. By the time the council, so this is Kipure, right? So it's a protected area. It's got special forests. It's a lovely area. The rest of it, right? And the planning is very limited for a place like that. There was original planning for a little something there, as far as I know. But what happened is totally above and beyond any planning that was allowed for this place. And what happened? They basically built asylum spoofer migrant plantation center stuff, and the council said, "Yeah, you don't have permission for any of that. Stop." This was a few years ago. And then they sent another letter like a year later to be like, "Yeah, I hope you're stopping on that." And when they went to check, they found that, well, I'll read it to you. Yeah, I'll just read it to you. But that's the background, right? Is that this, and when you see, I should have pictures of it. Kipure, it's massive, right? This isn't like a little small house, like a 2 semi-Ds together, or a small thing or whatever. This is like a complex. It's almost like a village. So anyway, by the time the council sent a second warning letter in January of this year, no fewer than 20 authorized structures had been built. These include 14 two-story split-level houses, a large concrete retaining wall, and a wood-clad communal canteen. But the enforcement notice issued last week by the council revealed that since its second warning letter about the alleged planning breaches was issued in January, 51 extra homes have been built without any apparent planning permission. The council has now ordered, this is Wicklow County Council, I assume, the council has now ordered that these be demolished within the next 4 months and that foundations also be dismantled. Kipure Manor Estate is owned by Dublin-based company called Tondo Limited, whose directors are listed as Owen Collin, 39, and 63-year-old Joe Christie. Both men are also involved in an investment firm called Quanta Capital, which has €1 billion in assets. See Mel Sutcliffe. So it goes on. And when questioned last month about when work began on the site, the company refused to comment. It also refused to answer any questions about any ongoing building. So just think about that, right? While your man here in Clonmel's getting arrested for basically just standing around, these lads are making or seeking to make further, they've made millions on lots of stuff, similar things. They're seeking to make further millions. They've invested a bit in this construction, so they're kind of a bit touchy about it, I suppose. Obviously, they wanted to go ahead. They want to walk away with another check for several million. But the county council have said, whoa. We never gave you planning permission to begin with. You never liaised with us. The sewage, the building itself, the protected area. Like, this is completely not like you're breaking the law, basically, right? And the state is more or less, like Roderick O'Gorman's department is more or less just saying, well, look, if you put buildings up, we'll put guys in. But the council then, obviously that's what they do. But the council are saying, no, this is illegal. This has none of the standard operating procedures going on here. We've said no. This is a council matter, ultimately, or at least we're heavily involved. We are a legal political body. We're the ones who have jurisdiction over granting you this or not. And not only have you not stopped, but you've just built 50 extra buildings. And we've told you to demolish it, including the foundations, and you just keep going. So what's going on, right? And these lads are, like I say, multi-millionaires, tens, hundreds, millions, whatever. Fat cats, hotels galore, trips around the world, whatever, on the back of all this stuff. And when they're told, effectively, you're breaking the law, it's just shrug and build more buildings. Because at the end of the day, the same guards who are arresting this man in Clonmel, they'll only arrest. They would, because of course, my view is that the lads behind this should basically have their houses raided at 6 a.m. and be dragged out by the scruff, right, and put in jail for 10 years. Like, in a sane society, that's what you would do. It's like, listen, you've caused harm to the land here. You've wasted council, police, everything time. You've flagrantly broken the law. Bear in mind that if I don't pay my motor tax, right, let's say I just decide, fuck that, I don't have enough money, but I want to drive my car, basically. So I'm just going to drive around. I get stopped by a guard. He gives me a ticket. And then I get a few letters in the door. I don't want to pay it. And the court sort of harass me on it and drag me. And then I get a knock on the door from the guards one day and say, I'm not paying it. Like, in theory, at least, there's a way in which they escalate that to where they kick my door in and drag me out and put me in jail. Just think of anyone who doesn't, and then they bring me in court and ask me to pay it. And I say, fuck you to the judge. I'm held in contempt of court. I'm put in jail basically indefinitely, potentially the rest of my life type of stuff, right? That's, if I break the law in some minor way, the end result is like jail. Whereas these lads, they do what they want apparently. and the state just says, you can do it. It's not legal necessarily, but we, the state, the real state, the power state, sort of just say, well, you can just do what you want, I suppose. Basically, like, fuck the council. The guards will only arrest who we want them to arrest, really. Like, when it comes to matters like this, when they shouldn't arrest this guy in Clonmel, we'll tell them, do arrest him. And when they should arrest the lads up in Wicklow, or the lads who are doing this in Wicklow, we'll tell them not to, right? As in, so basically, if some local guard liaised with the council and said, I see law breaking here, I'm going to go up and bang on, what's his name? A guard just, let's say a local superintendent or whatever went AWOL and just said, what are their names, these pricks? Owen Cullen and Joe Christie. They said, okay, they have a big residence somewhere in Kildare or Dublin or whatever, right? And what I'm going to do is drive up their long driveway, knock on the door and be like, you can at least talk to them, at least say, hey, I'm just cautioning you there or whatever, or just kick the door and arrest them. Say, like, you know what I mean? If they said, I can find technically that you've broken the law here, you've obviously broken the law, but like, I can find technicalities where I have power to arrest you over it. Because, I mean, just bear in mind, okay, here's another one, right? I put a mattress, I'm clearing out my house, I put a mattress in my car, or a big truck, like big van full of stuff, right? All sorts of objects, motor oil, all sorts of stuff, mattresses, house clearance. And I go down to the local river and I just tip it all in, right? In front of a guard. The guard's going to, I assume, arrest me on the spot, right? Because the guard can just say, well, I mean, in effect, you're littering, right? This is large scale littering. Why couldn't the guard just go to those guys and say, well, you're littering, basically? Like, it's the equivalent of if I rocked up to if I went into Phoenix Park, right? And I brought with me a bunch of trucks with concrete blocks, a few lads, a load of cement and the rest of it, right? Pipes and all of that. And just during the night, we started constructing a big, massive sort of makeshift house. Like, that would be treated like, well, you're, like, at the very least, we could say you're doing large scale littering, like grave breaking the law. I mean, put it this way, again, technicalities aside, I would assume I'm going in the back of a paddy wagon and I'm going to be like put in jail or heavily fined and made to pay for the whole thing. Like, isn't that just common sense, right? So what's the difference with these lads? Why is it not that way for them? Why is it not that the guards just look at it and go, yeah, I'm going to seek some sort of justification for this, and if it doesn't become apparent to me very quickly, then I'm going to go to these people's houses and treat them like what Garrod is talking about in Phoenix Park, but obviously like at a scale 50 times greater, and arrest you and prosecute you accordingly until some politician jumps in and tells me otherwise, at which point I'll whistleblow to the public and say, why am I not able to do my job? I'm a guard. I see like extreme breaking of the law. Why? You know, so it sort of tells you about the politics and the guards, how like obscenely corrupt it is, that they're there in huge, like a little mini army down in Clonmel. How many of them showed up? 20 or 30 of them to escort these foreign mercenaries, right? Against what, a ragtag handful of protesters outside, local. They're there for that. But like I say, if a little station of guards decided, yeah, we'll go up to these Gombeans houses, when they get to the house, the Gombeen would open the door and go, who the fuck do you think you are? I'm going to make some phone calls right now. So why don't you just fuck off and save yourself your job, right? That's what they would say. Actually, they'd say your job's gone. I mean, this is my speculation, that they would say, no. I'm not even going to give you the opportunity to fuck off. I'm going to make some calls right now and you're gone. Say bye-bye to your pension. The rest of it, right? We'll find something on you or whatever. But I'm in contact, like I'm me and you're you. You don't get to question me. I'm part of the people running the show here. Like, it's as nakedly corrupt as that, as far as I can tell from viewing what is publicly available. It's fucking disgusting. Sorry, I start to curse more as the show goes on, but that's what you have. You know what I mean? Just compare those two things and just seethe about it a little bit. But anyway, we'll leave it there. I will start reading super chats. That's crazy. The injustice is hard to deal with for a lot of people, I think, right now. So I'll start here with, I noticed last time when I put up super chats, whatever way it works, right, like, I don't know, do I have my thing? Maybe I need to raise my chair up or something. I can't do it right now. But you'll see, like, I put it up and it's like, it looks awkward, doesn't it? I'm hidden by. Anyway, so Sovereign Era, €5, thank you very much, says all nationalists must lift weights, must know how to defend themselves, must read books and contribute in some way, donating or activism. Join the NP. Yeah, I agree. I can't lift weights right now. My leg is screwed. I have an issue with my leg, and I don't want to get into it now, but like, it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know how this stupid healthcare system in the country works. Do I go to a GP? I went to a physio. I went to one physio, and he like didn't really know what it was exactly, and he like gave me a leg massage and got a shock device thing, electric thing out. And out of manners, I left. I was like, oh yeah, thanks very much. As has always been the experience in my life, that physios are largely bullshit, and they just want you to come back 6 more times and rake another €400 out of you. So basically, I'm trying to fix my leg without getting robbed in 5 different directions without actually ever getting anyone to see or diagnose it. So I will lift weights when that's fixed. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling. But general point, yeah, do something, read books, contribute. I'm not going to complain about donating or activism, for sure. But I do think if you're like, it's not being a grifter or something. It's like, if you're, it's just obvious. It's like, if you're doing activism in some way, you're writing articles, you're out on the street, you're doing whatever, great. If you're not, if you don't have much money to spare, which is totally how many people do, right? And so you're not going to support your favorite activist or something. And if you don't have money, well, maybe you could do something. You could write articles anonymously, or you could go front-facing publicly if you can get away with it, or you could do anonymous. And then if you don't want to do either of those things, but you do have money, then you should pick your person. And it's not a case of, oh, give your money to me, donate to me, super chat me. It's like, well, no, if it's not me, it's Phil Dwyer. If it's Keith Woods, if it's go down the list. I'm sure there's someone you spend your time reading, watching, listening to, you think what they do is effective. Then if that's what your strength is, that you have coin on you or whatever, but you don't want to do any of the other stuff, then that's what you can do. Like, you know, it's Keith Wood says that a lot, that like people should be doing something. It's not a case of grifting for donations or whatever. It's like, that's one option. There are other ones, but do one of them. For sure. Thank you. So James Anto Ward, 250 super sticker. Cheers. Appreciate it. Sheepdog, €20 says, unite the right or forget the fight. It's happening. Now's the time to put up or shut up, and zero apologies. Let's dictate the narrative, share and like lads, create the new media. It's more important than most realize. Yeah, I don't know. This whole thing of, see, this is the way I'm hidden on the screen, right? Yeah, it's really weird. Like, it looks really weird, but you know, the whole thing of like doing, like, sometimes I wonder, let's say I do these streams, right? Someone like Phil goes and attends and does live stream stuff, very effective. It's, you know, all very effective in different ways, right? Doing your own thing. And you kind of think, yeah, but how is it going to work? Is it going to change it? Like, everything that's just coming at us, we see the same thing on repeat. What's going to change? But it's like, I suppose, you know, doing whatever you're doing is better than not doing it, if you get me. Like, not doing it, you're definitely, nothing's going to happen. Whereas the constant chipping away at the morale and the narrative of the regime in some way, me spinning out rambles and different narratives and doing what, you know, not to brag, but sometimes I hear my talking points come out in different people or a little, like, stuff like that. I take pride in that. And it's a case of like, but then other times I think, how's it going to actually achieve something? But but then the last final point is that, like, whether it does or doesn't, it's better than not doing it. Like, not doing it will definitely do nothing. So, you know, that's totally convoluted of a response or whatever to you, but that's just what I think when I read what you say there. Thanks, Sheepdog. Bum, bada, bum, bum, bum. What else have we got here? So next is Finolo Maracu, €5 super sticker. Thanks very much. And second one too for you, Emmanuel. Yeah, lads, like I always say and here comes another regular armchair nationalist, 5, sound for the ramble, keep on going, solid work as always. I always say for the regulars, I have to say it, because it's the way my mother raised me. Appreciate it. By all means, always go for it. But I don't want regulars to feel like because they always do, that they've formed a habit that they must always keep supporting the chat, because otherwise the chat would be a bit empty or something. I don't want, like, you know what I'm saying, at your own prerogative. But that aside, yeah, cheers, and you're welcome for the ramble. Armchair Limerick Nationalist. So Roddy Murray, €2. Are you growing veg? Got into it myself this year. No, I'm not. I have maybe I could find some allotment area, but I've like got a decent sized back garden, I suppose. It's not like a big acreage or anything. It's like a standard, like non-rural gap back garden. It's a bit of grass, you plant some stuff, but I have a toddler and soon to be a toddler, and it's kind of tough to get them not to destroy it. So I just don't feel like bothering now, but I would like to at some point, maybe in the future. So Teacher Connor 5 says, I'll read this before I say it. Okay. Someone on Irish Space is encouraging Irish people to do something. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about that, you know. I support what you call it, you know, peaceful political change and robust debate in the open and free marketplace of ideas and stuff. So I don't know. That's all I do. But thank you, Teacher Connor, for the super chat. Sheepdog says, this is splitting Irish society. See, I know you were saying this as I was talking about something that doesn't lend itself to me reading it out after the fact. But so whatever you were referring to there in particular, this is splitting Irish society and social cohesion. You actually said social Cohen. But either way, thank you for that. So Ashlyn Ní Mhail Crean, €6. Cosúil na the Black and Tans. At least that ended. When does this end? How and what price will we pay for it? Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be bad. It's bad stuff. It's just bad either way. I'm going to have to look up the history of it, because I'm not like extremely literate in Irish history, to be honest. I know the basic 1, 2, 3 of it, like we all do from school and stuff. But like I'll need to, actually, that's what I'm going to do as soon as I'm finished here. Not like a deep literature dive, but like just a good solid Wikipedia, a couple of other sources, like just a bit of like a quick, like a 20-minute Google refresher on like what exactly actually went on. Because I understand, like I say, I understand the basics, but some more details, like as a sentient adult, somewhat learned adult now, I could go back more than I did in secondary school on it, you know. So that's what I'll be doing. Because it might help to understand the present a bit better, you know. Sheepdog, €2. Stay sane. I'll try my best. I don't think I ever was very sane to begin with. I don't know. Stay sane. It's a good point, though. It's so like crazy, the stuff that's going on. It's like, just don't like it. It's a tough one because it's so mad. It's almost like the only like natural thing is to go completely mad. And yet you can't, like, you know, you just can't. So I don't know. So finally, Ed the Statesman, €10. King of the Ramblers, great talk this evening, Garrod. Yeah, I know. And it's one of those things where when I converse with people, I like to think I'm not terribly antisocial or a conversation monopolizer. At least I try to be a reasonable conversationalist with people, right? But I might have a tendency to kind of want to talk or want to say something on my mind or want to respond and jump in, and you know, and I would probably err on the side of person who has to sort of kind of control myself to try to listen as well. So this is good, like, isn't it? Because I'm just talking into a camera. It's a rare outlet for such a tendency to have this. So thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. So yeah, wrap it up there, guys. I'll see you soon, and take care of yourselves. Ihawa. Boom.